Good morning and welcome to OTB AM this Friday morning. Myself, Adrian Barry, alongside Dave McIntyre this morning. Good morning to you, Dave.
Good morning.
All is well with the world?
Yes.
I'm just mildly laughing away to myself there because we've been having a discussion about players that have played for provinces that they're not native to.
Yeah.
And I just landed on the fact that Stephen Keogh was from Limerick just half a second before we went to air there. So yeah, we just had Alan Quinlan in the studio giving us a bit of a pre-show pep talk, as he tends to do of a Friday morning, and it's got us pumped and juiced and ready to go. And we've got lots of good stuff coming for you between now and 9 o'clock or thereabouts, or just after, no doubt, Dave. Last week we thought we'd get out of Dodge about 9ish, but I think it was a good half 9 before we
it was half 10
the studio last Friday morning. I expect something similar again this morning. So lots of good stuff coming for you. Keep your comments coming into us. We're going to get stuck into the back pages very shortly, including an interesting story, an ongoing story about Stephen Gerrard. We'll get Dave's thoughts on that. We're going to have the Friday hot takes at Kevin Kilbane upcoming, including reflections on last night's game at the Emirates, where Arsenal came up a little bit short in the end, albeit with a 1-1 draw. We're going to talk about Ulster Rugby, and we're going to get an Ulster voice to do just that. Stephen Ferris is going to join us in a little bit to discuss the woes that Ulster Rugby are going through on and off the pitch at the minute. So that is coming your way at about 8:30 or thereabouts. Sunderland are in demise. They're in big crisis. They're about to drop out of the Championship and into League One. And so we're going to get the thoughts of George Caulkin, who writes for the London Times and is a regular contributor to Off the Ball, and a very good contributor at that. So he's coming your way a bit later to get a steer on exactly what's happened at Sunderland and where the hell that club is going to from here on out. And then we're going to, as always, during the Punchestown Festival, mark a card in the company of John Duggan. That's coming your way about 9 o'clock. So we're already planning to be on air after 9 o'clock, so I suspect that's exactly the direction we're headed. So keep your comments coming into us. Hashtag OTBAM. Leave them on the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel or wherever it is that you are. But we were having that discussion, Dave, in the context of all the links of Joey Carberry and Ross Byrne particularly to Ulster over the last while, and we were just discussing the likelihood of getting behind your province when there's a whole bunch of players who are native to another province playing for them.
Yeah, there's the debates around the fabric and tradition of your province versus the inescapable fact that we are now in the midst of a professional era. It's a business. We're winning games and lifting trophies, and generating commercial revenue is probably the most important thing for the provinces to continue to progress, and then that feeds into the national team. But there is a balance to be struck. Like we're nowhere near the situation that we are in England or in France, where it is just so professional and business orientated that, you know, you wonder, would Racing fans really bother them if they're 15 guys that they have no connection to, but they're good enough to win a top 14 championship and a European Cup, where there's no one who's come through the academy. Maybe there's some ex-Toulouse, ex-Toulon, ex-Clermont guys in their team, and a few Kiwis and a few South Africans, etc., etc. It wouldn't bother them at all, I would say. Well,
ultimately it might be outside influences, if ever Irish rugby, the provinces ever go that way in terms of the movement of players, either within provinces or externally. It might be the external provinces. Like, it strikes me that if Ireland always remains in full control, as it is kind of at the minute, of its contracts and of its players, there's never any reason to overly, outside of the few examples that we've had over the years, to overly necessarily mingle the provinces.
No, well, there never was until this point. Like, we weren't, it's 10 years ago we weren't having this debate. There was the odd guy that moved, but there was no high profile moves there were between the provinces. Like, we nearly had a couple. Luke Fitzgerald supposedly had a potential move to Munster lined up at one stage, but that didn't come through. There are very few. Robbie Henshaw's the most controversial one over the last 10 years.
Yeah,
and
but again,
it even was that controversial. Well, he was moving to a better team, a team with more prospects of playing the Champions Cup, winning European Cup. So, but I mean, it was high profile at the time, 2 years ago. But all of this is on the back of, you say, of the piece by Peter O'Reilly in last week's Sunday Times, where supposedly David Nizifor and Joe Schmidt rocked up to the Leinster training ground in the week of a European semi-final and issued an ultimatum, telling Leo Cullen that he had to choose between Ross Byrne and Joey Carberry. Whoever he chose would stay at the RDS and the other would head to Belfast. Now, we have since been told that, you know, these types of conversations go on all the time, that no player would ever be told to move against his will, and that it was far from an ultimatum that was issued. But at the same time, you have to wonder how far a province can push it before their own supporters decide they no longer want to go and watch them. Now, our listeners will know I only have to open my mouth and you can identify me as being from Leinster. and I'm a Leinster rugby fan.
Strong D4 accent.
Exactly, yeah. But if 7 or 8 of the Leinster regular...
Tommy does point out that you really are a Cavan native, so, you know.
Yeah, so I'm an Ulster Rugby fan as well, is what you're saying. If 7 or 8 of the Leinster regular starting 15 were from Munster, it would get to the point where I would not be as pushed going to watch them. Now, I put that out on Twitter, speaking to try and get the thoughts of some Ulster fans during the week, and a couple did come back to me and say, we don't want Joey Carbery, for a number of reasons.
I think that's bullshit, I have to say. I think Joey Carbery rocks up. And by the way, if you're a neutral Irish rugby fan, like, the opportunity to see somebody like Joey Carbery, who we believe is an absolute star on the rise, playing some sort of regular rugby is... pretty enticing.
We're not talking about neutral rugby fans, we're talking about Ulster fans.
I know, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I also think it's bullshit, because, like, what are the options? IRFU are going to provide them with what we believe is going to become a world-class 10, and not maybe that far off it. And they're going to say, no thanks, he's from Leinster, but we take somebody from Gloucester, or we take somebody from Saracens, or we take somebody from Paris. That's bullshit.
I'm talking about Ulster supporters. Yeah. I'm not talking about the Ulster hierarchy or those who have to come up with the budgets and have to look after the financial side of things on a year-to-year basis.
Like, why? So they can get behind somebody like Ruan Pienaar, but they can't get somebody behind somebody from Dublin.
Because they have no preconceived notions about Ruan Pienaar. He's just a South African, whereas they would have a preconceived notion when it comes to Joey Carbery, because I know he's born in Auckland, but he's essentially a dub. I think he's playing for Leinster, and it's already, or from a tie, sorry, our Kildare listeners and viewers will be up in arms.
All 4 of them, yeah.
You're adding another Leinster man into the mix. You could have double digits in terms of the numbers of Leinster players that would be. Yeah? What about him?
He's on his way to Ulster.
He is, yeah.
What's going to happen? I haven't heard a word of discontent about it, and B, if there is, and I don't believe there's a huge amount of it, after a couple of weeks he'll start to put in the performances that he's put in for Leinster over the last even weeks.
Yeah, performances,
that's all forgotten.
As Tiger Woods said, winning takes care of everything. And if Jordy Murphy does perform as he has been, to the point where I wonder if he's thinking, what have I done here?
That's exactly what he's thinking, I'm sure. Yeah.
Because his level of performance has been so good of late, and he's won a Grand Slam and he could win a Champions Cup medal. What a way to leave Leinster, but at the same time, the world has turned significantly for Jordy Murphy since he signed that contract with Ulster. But anyway, look, that's just the way things work sometimes. But I'm not talking about specific individuals. It's nothing against Murphy or Marty Moore or Joey Carbery or Johnny Cooney. It's the number of them. Eventually you will get to a tipping point where the sheer number of Leinster men in your team makes it less of an appeal for you to actually renew your season ticket, go and watch them on a weekly basis, because you're not watching Ulster. You're watching Leinster Light is eventually the point you're going to get to.
Do you think that Munster fans are slightly less enthusiastic towards previously the likes of Felix Jones, or currently an Andrew Conway or an Ian Keatley, because they're not from Munster?
Not at all. Because these guys are outliers. You and I, before we went on air, sat down and tried to make a list of the Leinster men that have played for Munster in the last 15 years. We got stuck on 5 in a 15-year period.
Not many.
There aren't many.
And none of them at the time of transfer. Maybe Felix Jones aside, because I remember there was a big fuss about him, and I remember Michael Cheika particularly being very peeved about the investment that Leinster had made in him, and the fact that he was, again, a real star in their eyes, and at that point had said, listen, I'm not getting enough game time, I'm off to Munster. So maybe him slightly aside, none of the rest of them really.
No, there weren't huge eyebrows raised. No. We came up with Niall Rowan and Ian Keatley, Andrew Conway, Felix Jones. There was a 5th, I can't even remember who it was. And we look going the other way. Now, these aren't direct transfers, but you're looking at Sean Cronin, Owen Redden, Liam Toland,
Trevor Hogan, Stephen Keogh.
But over a 15, 20-year period. The game is 22 years old in professional terms. So there's never been enough Leinster guys performing in a red shirt on a weekly or semi-weekly basis for Munster fans to feel that way. But I would love to get the thoughts of Munster fans if you were looking at 6 or 7 of them in your current best 15. At what stage, I'm not saying 6 or 7's the number, I'm just asking, what is the tipping point? From an Ulster point of view, from a Munster point of view, at what stage do you begin to see the fabric of your team diluted to the point where you are less likely to want to see them? And obviously also in that mix is, if you've got 7 or 8 Leinster players in it, at that point it's pretty obvious that the province is not doing their job in terms of bringing players in, and it raises a whole other part of that conversation. Definitely interested to get your thoughts. What are you thinking this morning? If there was that number of players in your team, are you less likely to get behind them? We've had Paddy Logan onto us on Twitter, Dave. He says it's not that we don't want Carbery, it's that we know he'd only be temporary until Sexton retires. Better to get a mentor for McPhillips, Lowry and Curtis.
that mentor thing does sort of crop up every now and then. It was certainly one that was used in relation to Ruben Pienaar before he left, that, you know, keep him there for another season, let him mentor some of the younger players coming through, and so he goes after that.
But like there's 18 months between Johnny McPhillips and Joey Carberry. So they're essentially the same age. Now, vastly different in terms of their experience already in their careers. And the trajectory. But Johnny McPhillips, his career is going to be stunted if Joey Carberry is the starting 10, because if Carberry settles in Belfast, for example, and gets this run of games outside of international windows, he is going to dominate that 10 shirt because he has the talent to do so. Where does that leave Johnny McPhillips? They do need somebody, and that's what a lot of the Ulster fans would have been saying to me, well, look, why don't we get an experienced foreign 10 to come in for 2 years and bring McPhillips on?
So why couldn't that be Joey Carberry?
Because Joey Carberry,
have the experience, but he will play the 10 for 2 years in the exact same way.
He's 22 years old. Like, he can't act as a mentor. He's not going to be bringing another guy through.
He is. Look,
he can't bestow the experience that he has on another young guy, 18 months his junior.
He is only 22, but he does have 10, 15 hurling caps already. Like, he's played a whole bunch of games.
I'm talking about a guy who's got 60, 70 international caps. Now, the problem is the Irish provinces are no longer fishing in that pond.
There's not many of those that are available.
You can't, the days of a Dougie Howlett arriving with, 60 odd All Black caps.
Lael Afan obviously was one, if they'd have managed to, sort of perfect example of that player you're
hold on
talking
to. But I mean, we will see the Howletts and the Ruben Pienaars, the Rocky Elsoms, the Brad Thorns far less often over the next 10 or 15 years, because unfortunately 4 Irish provinces, they can't shop in their market anymore. I'm
just happy that it's another week down, Dave, and we've managed to mention Brad Thorn again, so
there you go.
This is good time. Right, time for a look at the back pages.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.
All right, it's just a couple of minutes to 8 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you with us. Here's what's happening across the back pages this morning. A nice sunny shot there of Katie Taylor and her upcoming opponent Victoria Bustos of Argentina. They are in downtown New York ahead of their IBF and WBA lightweight unification bout on the Straight Outta Brooklyn Fight Night card this coming weekend, I think. The other big story, obviously, in the back page there, Gerrard enters the frame for a top job at Rangers. It's his, if he wants it, is really the essence of the story coming out of Glasgow, according to Roddy Forsyth. And, I mean, on the face of it, he's not, Dave, necessarily a guy with a huge amount of, we're talking about experience here. He's been managing the Liverpool under-18s, I think quite successfully as well, to be fair to him. But strong links with Rangers. It's his if he wants it. It'll be his first big job. There are parallels, obviously, with Graham Souness having done something kind of similar previously, albeit I think he was still playing at that time, Souness. And talked that he's going to bring in Gary McAllister with him, which would be, that's the world-class management team, Dave, right there.
You're comparing a Stevie Gerrard, Gary McAllister, managerial ticket to Bobby Robson, Steve Staunton.
Look, he's unproven as yet. But I mean, it'd be a wise thing to do in terms of bringing in McAllister, but the fit of Gerrard, who I believe is a Celtic fan, by the way.
I would even less managerial experience than he, in Gary McAllister.
Then
McAllister isn't the Bobby Robson in this.
No, I appreciate that. Absolutely,
duo.
no, I appreciate that. It was
you're bringing in two guys.
Cheap joke,
absolutely no managerial experience. Apparently his work ethic when it comes to the 18s is second to none, that he absolutely devotes certainly 6 out of 7 days to that job. He will look after the 18s, their own games, all the analysis that goes with that, and then head off later that day and watch a team from one of the younger underage groups. And he has taken to it really well. He was offered the MK Dons job about 6 months after he retired, and in his own words, it was like a smash in the face. He just realised he was nowhere near up to the standard that was required to just dive straight into management. And he said, give me another 6, 12, 18 months to kind of cut my teeth at this level, and I'll see where I am then. Well, we are that 6 to 12 months on, and suddenly it's a big job in terms of the cachet of it, the name of the club, the tradition of the club now. In European terms, they're minnows. But
is it the perfect job for him in a lot of ways? Like, given that, I mean, so the owner hasn't necessarily made a huge amount of investment in terms of players, but there's enough quality there that they're going to, the expectation is that they'll finish runners up to Celtic in the Scottish Premier League, and that's probably exactly where they're going to finish. So it's a bit of a shot to nothing for him, and good experience at a big club.
Well, it depends exactly what the expectation levels are and what is the budget going to be. Is it enough to maybe get to a cup final, finish second, maybe pick up one win over in the Old Firm over the course of a season, or is he expected to qualify from the group stages of the Europa League to take down a so-called big fish in that competition? Is he expected to be contending for the Scottish Premiership title in his first season or his second season? And does he have to win a trophy, for example? Because, you know, Rangers fans could turn pretty quickly if they're not getting results, or at the very least they're not seeing progress, which they haven't really been seeing since they got back into the top flight, although they could still finish second this season, and they're up against a huge club in Scottish Premiership terms, budget-wise, that they're an awful long way from being able to compete with.
Yeah.
So if
there's no indication that budget is going to come, by the way, from everything you hear.
No, there isn't.
The owner is not going to spend that money.
If he was given some sort of assurance as to what type of money he would be able to spend, certainly in relation to the other clubs in that division, and if expectations were very clearly laid out and he was happy with them. So it's also a gamble from their point of view, because they're a club that needs to start, you know, making inroads again, and you're going to bring in a guy with absolutely no managerial experience. So I think from both points of view, it is a bit of a gamble. I'm not sure what way he'll go. Look, you are going into a club with a huge supporter base. You're going to be games in front of 40, 50,000 fans every weekend. Good
prep though, isn't it? That's where you want to get to. I mean, that's ultimately what it is. It's a stepping stone to something else.
And look, you succeed there and you probably set yourself up then for a really big job. And we've seen Brendan Rodgers completely rebuild his career at Celtic Park to the point where maybe he's not far away from getting a big job.
B-Rog would be worth the entrance fee alone.
Box office.
He's a Celtic fan apparently.
He's also an Everton fan, so I mean, you can take all of that with a pinch of salt.
You make a reasonable point. The other thing was that, like, I mean, when you talk about the funds that were available when Souness went there, he was still playing, and he brought in Terry Butcher, who I think was the current England captain at that time, and the England goalkeeper, whose name escapes me,
Chris Woods.
He brought in both of those players at that time. Like, I mean, it's unlikely that Stevie G is going to be afforded the opportunity to do that in terms of his budget.
He had Trevor Stephen there as well. He had Mark Haitley there as well. Like, he really brought in an English backbone to that team, and it served them very well. Didn't they win 10 titles in a row? Not all under Graham Souness, but a number of them were. And I'm not saying that Stephen Gerrard's suddenly going to be repopulating the Rangers ranks with English players. The world is very different now. At the time, Rangers and Celtic were more than capable of holding their own against the top teams from the Premier League. I remember when Leeds won the title in '92 and they got knocked out of the European Cup the following season by Rangers. I mean, that's unthinkable now.
Yeah, absolutely.
25 years on.
Yeah. All right, that's the back page of the Irish Independent, and also a story here by Colin Keyes as well. Portugal trip puts Wexford hurlers in training camp firing line. So, I mean, I for one am shocked to learn about this. Another county is in probable breach of the ban on training camps as it emerged that Wexford hurlers have also set up in Portugal for the week. I'm shocked and astounded, I tell you.
The club month for April, it's working pretty well.
Absolutely flying it.
It's flawless.
Front page of the sports section of the Irish Examiner this morning is a chance spurned here. Wasteful Gunners let 10-man Atletico off the hook, and they certainly did that, conceding late to a decent enough goal from Antoine Griezmann last night. So 1-1 and a pretty dejected Alexandre Lacazette there on the front page of the Examiner. So we'll have more of that conversation with Kevin Kilbane in just a little bit. It's also Lacazette pulling his shorts in frustration on the front page of the Times Irish edition here, the sports section here. Griezmann sucker punch stuns Arsenal is the headline here, and Rangers offer Gerrard first manager's job, as we've been discussing there. The Guardian is our next port of call this morning, and leading the way here again is a shot of Antoine Griezmann after insisting that ball go into the net last night to level up that game. Atletico spoiled the party is the headline here. Wenger's big night shattered by Griezmann's late letter, of course, his last home game in Europe. So Arsene Wenger bowing out there with a pretty disappointing draw. The Irish news this morning, it's GAA for this morning here. Fears eased over our key Armagh pair. This is injury fears over Ethan Rafferty and Rory Grugan. Seems as if both of those are going to be fit. Dave, I don't know what you think about Armagh's chances, a team obviously who reached the quarters last year. Their opportunity to push on a little bit in the coming year, and obviously a couple of key players being fit is going to aid that. And their warm weather training will have gone. They've been in Portugal an awful long way. They've been away as well. Yeah. Look, they've already achieved objective 1 for 2018, which is to get themselves out of Division 3. So they're already in positive territory, and a couple of championship wins. I don't know if they're going to get to an All Ireland quarter final, but they are in that mix of tier 2 counties, if you want to call them that have a very good chance and will be targeting the Super 8. If they could do that, it's been a brilliant year. Yeah. All right. Front page of the Racing Post this morning is chatter about Punchestown Day 4 today. We're going to be talking to John Duggan about this shortly. Can Samcro get Elliott off the ropes, which is roughly where he is at the minute? He's 420,000 in the hock to behind Willie Mullins here ahead of the Les Day Punchestown. It's pretty bloody incredible given that he was, I think, $500,000 down heading into the festival. I mean, it was the same story last year, that it was very much overturned with the Punchestown Festival. But
I tell you, there's a lot more people than just Gordon Elliott who's desperate for Samcro to get the business done today, and a lot of them are not a million miles away from this studio.
Those people are, Dave. Yeah. What have you got for us?
I'm going to kick off with the Irish Times. Again, it's about Arsenal. Arsenal undone by darkly familiar defensive error. A really good night for Arsenal until that last 10 minutes when Antoine Griezmann got that equaliser. And a lot of fears over Liverpool and their supporters, in particular, their trip to Rome in the next few days. Liverpool to meet Roma officials over safety fears. Delegation from club will travel to Rome today ahead of the second leg. I guess, let's face it, you're going to Rome, you're going to have to deal with the Roma supporters. And their reputation is not what it should be, to say the least, and that's been very kind to them. The Herald this morning, Wenger dream fading. Griezmann goal, huge blow to Gunners, and a picture of a fairly dejected looking Aaron Ramsey, who had one particular effort and goal that was clawed away brilliant by Jan Oblak. It was an absolutely stunning save.
After they'd gone 1-1 as well. I mean, that
after gone 1-1, and you just got the feeling this is not going to happen for you. It's not going to be your night, because that was a save of the highest quality.
The players were on the pitch afterwards. We'll talk to Kevin about it in a bit, but the players were on the pitch afterwards, like, dejected. Certainly the commentary tones were, this game is, beyond Arsenal now. It feels to me to be over fatalistic almost. Like, the game is still very much alive.
To me, it's not.
Do you think it's done?
Well, I would be astonished if Arsenal got out of this one, because they're up against one of the best teams in Europe, albeit
with a great defence at home and all that. But I mean,
incredible defence at home. 4 goals conceded in the league all season at home.
Being dejected on the pitch afterwards in a way that suggested the game was done was not great body language.
Well, I don't know if it's that they were. I don't know if that body language is telling a story of them feeling the tie was over. It was that they poured their heart and soul into that 90 minutes last night. They really played well. They absolutely harried and hassled Atletico all over the field. It was one of the best performances I've seen from Arsenal this season. And you've fallen short, and that is to a late equaliser. So you can understand their dejection in the moment. I don't think it's because they felt we've no chance of scoring over there and that this tie is over. I think that's a stretch. But I feel that the tie is as good as over, because I just don't see them getting through 90 minutes at the Wanda without conceding at least once. Because he just showed last night one lapse, really poor lapse. Nacho Monreal, who was quite good last night, just switches off for half a second, plays Griezmann onside.
And then Koscielny does what he does and kicks the ball onto his own chest.
Yeah, that was a little unfortunate. Part of me looking at it was going, why doesn't Koscielny just go with Griezmann and allow him have the ball and deal with it from there? But if that ball doesn't ricochet off his chest and it goes, a foot to its left and it goes over his shoulder, well, it's a brilliant piece of defending. So I couldn't be overly critical of Koscielny there, and even the manner in which Ospina made the save, and then you had to feel for Mustafi slipping just as he arrives on the scene, and even then made a pretty good effort.
Back. I think that was actually what tripped him up in the end. And actually, I mean, if he was in any way calm, even then, he still could have stood up. But he was just so frantic, I think, at that point that Griezmann was about to kick the ball.
Yeah, well, he just wanted to make sure he was there by the time the trigger was pulled by Griezmann. And he just slips at the crucial moment. And even then, he deflected it into the net. So he almost managed to get it.
He also stuck his hand out in an effort to try and paw it away, to be fair to him.
So I think the blame was with Monreal, but I thought Arsenal could have been pretty pleased, put it this way, if they were playing in that manner all season. Wenger may not be heading out the door, and they certainly wouldn't be 10, 15 points off the pace when it comes to a Champions League place. So that was one of their better performances this season. They were just up against a very good team. The Mirror Sport this morning, mad, bad and sad. Dire defending cost wasteful Gunners again as they failed to hold on against 10-man Atletico. And another reference to the potential for Stephen Gerrard to take the job at Ibrox. Gerrard is #1 choice to take over at Rangers. The Irish Daily Star this morning. Omo, I didn't. Jose Mourinho at pains in a piece with Brazilian media yesterday to insist I wasn't actually the guy that sold Mo Salah while at Chelsea. I was the man who brought him to Stamford Bridge, albeit then didn't play him, didn't give him any game time, and was happy enough for him to go on loan to Fiorentina. But Jose Mourinho was saying, don't blame me for the fact that the current PFA Player of the Year is no longer a Chelsea player. Faugheen's a Mull marvel. Faugheen rolled back the years with a stunning performance as a catcher. Yesterday's feature race at Punchestown, the Ladbrokes Champion Stayers Hurdle, and FA Wembley sale furore. There's more on the potential sale of Wembley Stadium to the Jacksonville. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
if you're looking to me for confirmation of that, Dave, that's worrying concern.
You're all over these NFL stories. The Irish Sun this morning, Patetico. I like that one. Wenger's flops are rocked by 10-man Madrid. Another reference to Stevie Gerrard. All yours, Gerrard, when it comes to the Rangers job. And the mess laid plans is a little piece of Brian Cody. Says the GAA's attempts to tidy up fixtures in April has made a mess of club games in Kilkenny, and I'm sure he's not the only manager that feels that way at the moment. And lastly, for me, the Irish Daily Mail. Time machine. He really did roll back the years. It was a brilliant display from Faugheen yesterday for Willie Mullins. Land's huge victory. Mullins is favoured in title battle with Elliott. And then Cody hopeful of a summer return for Hogan. It's big news if you're a fan of Kilkenny hurling. Richie Hogan is back in light training, and Brian Cody remains hopeful the former hurler of the year will play some part in the revamped Leinster Championship. A Leinster Championship and an All-Ireland Championship minus Richie Hogan is not a good thing.
All right, they are the back pages for this morning. Keep your comments coming in, and we've had loads of them on all our topics so far, so we're going to bring you a flavour of those now, and then we're going to get into some rugby discussion with Stephen Ferris, but a couple of the football ones that have come in. One rugby one to begin with first from Brian Gucky and Dave. He says, serious Leinster protection bias from off the ball. Hashtag OTB AM.
What's that referring to?
It's essentially somebody with a Leinster accent talking about things that are not to do with Leinster.
But Leinster protection bias, is that what they said? I've absolutely no idea what that means. So I'm just going to put it down as nonsense.
Brian, comment back in, let us know what it is you're talking about. George Savage says, Gerrard to Rangers, surely that would stick in the craw of a lot of Liverpool fans. So, I mean, the inference being that I guess Celtic are maybe more aligned with Liverpool culturally than Rangers might be. Is it going to be an issue? I wouldn't have really thought so.
I would like our Liverpool supporters to get in touch with us, and I don't see why. Is there any kind of enmity between Liverpool and Rangers? Is there any history there? It doesn't seem.
No, I don't think so.
Not to my recollection.
Negative history, obviously. Yeah.
And I know Stephen Gerrard did bring the Liverpool 18s up to play their Rangers counterparts after he took the job, and he was waxing lyrical about the stadium, the atmosphere. He went to an Old Firm game, talked about tradition and the history of the club. So certainly Stephen Gerrard doesn't seem to have any issue with Rangers.
The story here is that the Rangers owner is good mates with Kenny Dalglish, apparently, and was sitting next to him at the game the other night and all this sort of stuff, and too exuberantly, by the way, celebrating the Liverpool goals for a lot of Rangers fans' tastes, apparently, was one of the bit of reflections that had come out of it. But that he's a friend of Kenny Dalglish and would have said to him, listen, or I presume in the course of that conversation, listen, we're looking for a new manager, have you any ideas? Well, this guy over here is going pretty good. I mean, you might have heard of him before. Yeah. And that's how the matchmaking is made, as it turns out. I mean, it would be interesting if Kenny Dalglish was the kingmaker in this entire conversation, obviously.
I would be very interested to see him take the job, just to see how it goes. It would make me more inclined to watch some Scottish Premiership if Stephen Gerrard is standing in the dugout at Ibrox. That's
a fair point too, yeah. The Old Firm derby suddenly take on a bit of a new hue as well, don't they?
Well, it does, and as you've already said, you know, if it's not the most bitter rivalry in sport, the Brendan Rodgers, Stephen Gerrard rivalry, but look, I'm sure they got on extremely well, but just the fact that they would be facing each other in the dugout as well would add another little bit of an ingredient into the Old Firm recipe, because look, let's face it needs something. Not just the Old Firm, but the Scottish Premiership needs something. It needs a little bit of razzmatazz.
It needs Rangers to be able to compete. That's quite a simple thing, really, but the owner needs to obviously get his...
They need a title race. They do need Rangers to be able to compete, and maybe one other team to at least make a fist of it.
Yeah. Genuine question from Andrew Place here on Twitter. He says, sorry if it's a stupid one, how do you listen to OTB AM? Is it only a Facebook or Periscope thing?
No!
Is it on the internet radio by any chance? Not on internet radio to my knowledge, Andrew, but you can listen to it if you go to offtheball.com and just click on the little play button up on the top right hand side, and you can stick it onto your audio stream or put it on Bluetooth in the car or whatever else it is you're doing yourself, because we're kind of conscious, Dave, that there's people on the bike or it's not always possible.
There's no need to tune out just because you have to get into the car or hop on the train or the bus.
I mean, if you were on the bike, you could sort of cycle along, if you're in Dublin on the bike, cycle alongside, just remain alongside a Dublin bus for the entirety of your journey way in to hook into the good Wi-Fi and sort of keep watching as you travel on in.
There is
might not be the safest thing in the world.
Maybe not in Athlone, but up in Dublin and a lot of the country we have 3G and 4G in some cases.
Yeah. Not unlimited though, Dave, is my main thing. And you know, if you're watching, which you should be doing, an hour and a half of OTB every morning, your data is going to get eaten up. But you know, good Wi-Fi is the solution to all of that.
Go down the unlimited route.
Listen in the audio stream. So keep your comments coming in there. That's the short story here. Hashtag OTB AM. Get us right here on the Facebook page, or on the YouTube page too. We've lots of good stuff coming for you over the next hour thereabouts. We're going to talk to Kevin Kilbane to preview the weekend's football and get his thoughts too on the demise, it seems, of Sunderland, who are on their way, confirmed as of last weekend, on the way to League One after that loss to Brentford, I think it was, and they've Fulham upcoming tonight, but they are gone. Chris Coleman says he's keen to stay on. He's had no communication from the owner, Ella Short, as to what exactly is going to happen with the club or happen with himself. Fascinating story, given particularly the Irish links has been there over the last few years. There's also been links with Niall Quinn with a potential return. Will the club go into administration is another big question that it seems as if Ella Short is keen to get rid of the club.
They're losing half a million a week.
Yeah,
is the numbers that have been thrown around.
And he's
out there.
plugging the gap.
He's plugging the gap, but he was plugging the gap with the aid of the Premier League parachute payments that they would have been enjoying this season. They'd start to dwindle now from here on. So you're having to fend for yourself. There are guys on long-term contracts at the club. The one that's been continually mentioned is Jack Rodwell, who's on 70,000 sterling a week. So that's 3.6 million a year for a League One player, who has no relegation clause in his contract from either the Premier League to the Championship. He hasn't played since October. He's only played 5 times.
He's disappeared for the last few weeks to the point where Chris Coleman can't contact him.
So, but he's still picking up his wages. I would say there's an outside chance the club is could fold, because eventually Ella Short is just going to think, do you know what, I'm just getting out of here. I'm not going to plug this gap any longer.
They've been there for 10 years now, and I think he's not always been the flavour of the month with Sunderland fans, and I had been over there about 10 years ago, actually, just after he took over, and it's a point we'll put to George Caulkin later, but the buzz around the city and the buzz around the club, and Niall Quinn was involved at the time.
Was Keane managing the team at the time? Because I went to see them when Keane was in charge, when they were on this unbelievable run from the bottom 4 of the Championship to the top of the Championship, and they were 2 or 3 wins short of promotion at the time, and the place and the city, as you say, was
buzzing. And it was, from recollection, it was Good Friday or Easter Monday or some sort of bank holiday with not much action going on, and I met Niall Quinn at the club, and he took me around the club, and there was such his enthusiasm for it, the buzz around the city for it. It was the weekend that they played United in the league. It was the time that Federico Makeda, I think, do you remember him? Came into, this guy is the next United star.
He scored that day, didn't he?
I think he scored that day. Yeah. I remember that morning I had happened to be staying in Durham, and it happened that the United team happened to be staying in the same hotel, and I remember being in the lift the previous night with Federico Makeda and the small assistant, was he the assistant coach or one of the main physio guys, the guy with the tinted glasses, short guy, was always a Ferguson. Wherever you saw Ferguson, you always saw him around the dugout. Can't think of his name. But yeah, it was just an incredible time to have been in Sunderland. The buzz around, like I'd spoken to a lot of people around the city about the club, and just an incredible thing going on. It seems like that relationship is totally fractured now.
Well, he doesn't want to be there, and he isn't even looking for a sale price. He just wants to offload the club to somebody else, with the agreement being that they will take the debts off him. And the debts are around about £140 million at the moment. Who's going to want to do that? The club is worthless at the moment, absolutely worthless. It's not worth a penny.
So should he put it into administration and sell it off? Is that because I think he's indicated that that's not something he wants to do, but I mean, if I want to buy the club, I don't want to be saddled with all that debt. I want some sort of a clean slate.
You want to be able to start from zero at the very least, instead of already starting £140 million in the hole, and you now have to get through at least 2 seasons, at least, before you can get yourself back up into the Premier League. We've seen Blackburn go down, not back-to-back relegations, but we saw them drop out of the Championship last season. They've come straight back up this season under Tony Mowbray. So all is not lost, but they need to stop the hemorrhaging, and they have to get rid of guys like Jack Rodwell. All these guys who are on anything above 20 grand a week need to be jettisoned, because you just cannot afford, you will not be able to stay afloat in League One, even though they are comfortably going to be the biggest club in the division. I was looking at who they'll be up against next season. They will probably have the best attendances by 10 or 15,000, even if attendances drop off significantly
they are falling
at the Stadium of Light. But it is quite a sad story for a one-club town that is just so passionate, and the support so vociferous, that they've ended up in this position. And it's a long, long way from those days when they're in the Championship under Keane and the Premier League under Keane. Absolutely, and you just thought, you know what, the sky's the limit at the moment.
Right, we'll talk to George Caulkin of the London Times a little bit later on just about all of that and get his thoughts on exactly what's happening on the ground in Sunderland. It's 8:20 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us, and keep your comments coming in. There's been plenty of them, whether it be on the rugby or on the football or all that good stuff, so keep them coming in. We're going to take a short clip. Keith Andrews' show went to air yesterday, as it does every Thursday at 12:30, right across all Off the Ball channels and on offtheball.com. On the website and all of that good stuff. It really is a top class show and some top class chat yesterday. Keith had been across to Burnley to speak with the manager Sean Dyche, as well as a whole bunch of Irish players. But let's take a short clip. Here is Keith talking to Sean Dyche, I think is the clip that we have. He's talking to Sean Dyche. We're going to hear actually not that clip. Here he is talking to Stephen Ward and Jeff Hendrick about their different paths into the Premier League.
Would either of you change anything about the route that you went?
I wouldn't know. I think obviously it might be different for Jeff. He was probably in a different position than I was when I was his age. He was, probably the top, in the top two players in the whole country. Probably him and Robbie vying for that. Him and Robbie vying for it. They tell me in the car all the time he was better. But no, for me, I think, listen, I went away on trial and the usual. But for me, I think staying at home and learning my education at Bowes was massive for me, because I don't know how I would have reacted coming to sort of an academy, trying to go on loan, being away from home, trying to go on loan. And when I signed for Wolves, I played men's football. I felt mature enough to go over there and deal with everything that the championship and sort of the exposure gave to you. So for me, it was definitely the right path. But as you say, it's different for everyone, and I think if you make it to where you want to go, whatever part you've been on is going to be the best one for you.
What about you, Joe?
I'm going to say the same. I wouldn't change anything. It got to a stage where I'd been on enough trials and away enough times where, don't get me wrong, I sometimes hated going on trials, being away for 4, 5, 6 days. But when it came to the stage, I'd sat down and signed with Derby, and I was just looking forward to getting away that much that I didn't even get homesick at the start. Nothing at all. My parents would give out to me at times for not calling or texting enough. I was just looking forward to getting away in with the lads, getting to know them and training every day, and I was loving it. I was lucky as well. There was 5 of us the same age from Ireland, so that definitely helped me settle in. But just getting in training, I got a lot fitter at times, from the age of 13 to 16 or whatever. I wasn't the fittest of players, but that gave me a different side to my game. I was able to go box to box. I was learning that, and I had a good coach at the time, and I felt like I really improved very quickly in my first few years, and I could see the differences, and I loved it. Within about 8-9 months, as I got to train with the first team a few times, so I got to see how the professionals were doing it, and then that made me even more hungry.
Yeah, that's Jeff Hendrick and Stephen Ward there in conversation with Keith Andrews. It's about 23 minutes in full. Keith's full report from Burnley, and includes a long conversation with Sean Dyche. Really interesting conversation. Joey Barton features in it as well. He just happens to wander on into the training ground, so Keith gives him a mic and away they go. It was just about an hour before he got the Fleetwood job, so there's none of that stuff, but lots of good stuff about the Burnley culture and how it's been instilled there over the last 5.5 years. Check out the full piece, that full mini documentary. It's up on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/offtheball. It is time to talk some rugby. We're going to be joined on the line in just a second by the former Ulster back row and Ireland back row, Stephen Ferris, to talk about Ulster's woes on and off the pitch. So you've been encouraging us to have an Ulster voice on to talk about it, so that's exactly what we've done, and in the company as well of a contributor that we really like and have had on plenty of times over the last while. So we're going to talk to Stephen Ferris in just a minute. But the thing that's kicked all of this off has been Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball on Monday, and here's exactly what he had to say about Ulster.
Potentially they could, one of those, Carberry or Byrne, could leave a winning culture, a winning environment. You look at someone like Jordy Murphy, I have to say, he it can't be easy playing some of the best rugby of his life, both from a Leinster perspective but also from Jordy's perspective, where things are clearly not going right in Ulster. They don't have a coach, a little bit of a basket case at the moment, and he's going up there to try and play his rugby from next year on.
I would say no if I was the two lads. No, not going.
Yeah, but it's a tough one, you know. It is, because I would too, because there's a good chance you're going to be winning medals, or you're going to be in the hunt for winning medals. At the moment, the Ulster are a while away from that.
Isn't the coaching better? Like, I have a coaching ticket here, which has...
That's the other thing. So a young player...
How am I actually going to get better?
Yeah, so they don't know, not knowing what's going to happen up in Ulster, who's going to come in, you know, am I going to improve as a player? Whatever about playing more often, what skills, what am I being taught on a week-to-week basis?
Yeah, Brian O'Driscoll on Monday's OTB AM, and the basket case quote was obviously one that was pulled out there and challenged by the Ulster wing, Jacob Stockdale, this week, probably slightly misrepresenting a broader, maybe more nuanced point from Brian O'Driscoll on Monday's show. But you've been exercised about it. We've had lots of contact about this conversation this week, encouraging us to have an Ulster voice on to speak about it. And one of those emails was from David Kenny this week, who dropped an email to say, love listening to the engaging rugby chat on the podcast. However, was disappointed listening to the latest podcast regarding the Ulster situation, and believe a huge opportunity was missed. While all of the lads are entitled to their own opinions on the matter, it was all solely from a Leinster perspective. There were several key and salient points omitted by not having an Ulster perspective on this matter, such as the impact of enforced decisions from the RFU, etc., and the situation of Ulster, or that rubbish, as Liam says, according to David here, Liam Toland, who was on us with us during the show, who is from Munster, by the way, I should point out. Hopefully in the future, when discussing these off-field topics specific to provinces, there will be a contribution from a more informed representative of that province. And Stephen Ferris, that is where you come in. Good morning.
Good morning, how are we?
Very good, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Good. So, no problem.
To misrepresent Brian on the show on Monday, Ulster is a basket case. What's the defence?
Well, I'm sitting here with my proud Ulster training jersey that I pulled out of the wardrobe to do this for you guys. But look, I think I said on social media late last night that I was going to get ripped into Brian O'Driscoll today, and that's certainly
right.
It's pretty much disagree with what Brian said. I think if anybody looks at the last couple of years within Ulster Rugby, on and off the pitch, things haven't been great. So for Brian to come out with that opinion, I think is totally fair. However, I believe that going forward, Ulster are a team that are going to galvanise themselves. They're going to get back together. They're going to get back in the straight and narrow, and they're going to try and get to the heights that they were at 5 or 6 years ago. And I think people easily forget where Ulster were 5 or 6 years ago. And there's been articles that I've read in the paper about should they abolish Ulster because of what they've been through over the last 18 months and blah, blah, blah. I think that's complete nonsense. I think there are great foundations in place at Ulster, but just the last year, 18 months, has been so negative. And another thing, Adrian, to talk about is, Jacob Stockdale said about Brian only been up to Belfast. You could count in both hands. Many times Brian has been to Belfast. Well, I'm in Belfast every single day, and it's been on everybody's lips about what's happened in Ulster Rugby over the last 18 months to 2 years. And, there has been so much negativity. And I think even the last 3 weeks, just the way the lads have played on the pitch, got themselves out of a bit of a hole. The shackles have been off. They're playing some really entertaining rugby, playing and beating some good teams. So for me, the last 3 weeks has brought a lot of positivity. And, I think going forward, that's what the boys have got to do, is got to go out and express themselves on the pitch and try and forget about all the craziness that's happened over the last couple of years.
I know that Shane Logan, the Ulster Rugby CEO, has been a lightning rod for a lot of the stake on this, and I know that you've been critical of him yourself over the last while, but he's done some various bits and pieces, done some select interviews, and has answered some tough questions over the course of that, to be fair to him. But he's answered his own tough questions, in fairness to him. That is a fair observation. News journalists have again been banned from the press conferences this week, and we speak about sort of Ulster Rugby trying to challenge that image of a basket case. They've been banned again this week. There hasn't been any great explanation for it. There's been a bit of fuzzy logic in terms of sports journalists told us they didn't want them in, and then the sports journalists said that wasn't at all what we said. The news journalists were denied the opportunity to come, and ultimately, if they had been let in initially to ask whatever questions they wanted to ask, the story would have been dead by now. What I'm saying is, it doesn't appear as if Ulster Rugby are actually helping themselves here in terms of that openness and transparency.
I totally agree with you. I think every single day up here in the papers, there seems to be something else that's fueling the fire. And everybody just wants this to go away. Everybody wants to be talking about the Ulster Rugby victory against Glasgow and the 5 points in the last-minute try by Sean Reedy. That's what everybody wants to be reading in the papers. Instead of picking up the papers and seeing the media ban, and there's a whole farce is kicked up about that, and people are getting stuck into the media consultants at Ulster Rugby. And I just think, from a broader perspective, they just need to get on with things, and it's really, really tough. And I think it's had an effect on the players over the last number of months. And going forward, there's only one game left at the end of the season here against Munster away on Saturday, and just all this negative press that Ulster Rugby are receiving can't be good for the team. And hopefully they get it all sorted out, because to me it's laughable at times.
Yeah, because ultimately, if you have nothing to hide, there's nothing to be lost by flinging open the doors. I mean, we've heard about, the core culture, but the line was about the core values of respect, inclusivity and integrity. Like, it feels as if it's a little bit from that at the minute in terms of the hierarchy at the club.
Yeah, I suppose I've been a big someone who's said about Shane Logan potentially not being up to the job, and the reason that I said that is because of the world domination speech that we've all heard about. And do you know what? It's starting to get to me that I'm having to repeat myself over and over and over again, because even in his post-trial comments that he come out with, the in-house media interviews that Shane Logan has done, he's come out and said the same stuff. He's come out and said about Ulster Rugby's, or Ulster in general, has got over 2 world wars and everything else. That's not what it's about currently. What it's about currently is getting Ulster Rugby on the straight and narrow, getting the brand, getting the business back on track, and making sure that the team performs, because everything from the top down starts with the professional team, and he hasn't delivered what he promised. He needs to be made accountable for saying that Ulster Rugby are going to be the world's best team within 5 years. And then within a couple of months after the whole trial being over, which was a relief for everybody, he comes out and he said it could take 20, 30, 40 years for this to happen. And I'm just like, come on, just a bit more honesty would be much appreciated. And I think I speak on behalf of everybody within Ulster Rugby, fans, probably some of the players as well, and the greater audience, that if you have honesty, then that's the best policy to go with, instead of this nonsense of trying to bluff everybody and pull the wool over everybody's eyes. And Shane Logan is just he's just hanging in there for me. And the way the lads have played the last 3 weeks, the kind of with the shackles off, like I alluded to, and just the energy and the pace, and it just seemed so fresh, and an air of something new was starting to happen. I think in the next season, if there was a new CEO in charge of Ulster Rugby, that would really, really help that.
Stephen, morning. It's Dave here. A new CEO is one side of the debate, but a new head coach is the other. And
yeah.
I mean, we are looking at maybe some additions that Ulster could possibly make to their squad in the close season. The basket case comment from Brian was stemming from that story that one of Joey Carberry or Ross Byrne might end up in Belfast. But you can understand why any player, whether it's Ross Byrne or Joey Carberry or an import from another league or another country, why they'd have serious questions as to whether or not they would want to go to Belfast, because right now they've no idea who they're going to be playing for next season. Is there any progress on that road? Are there any stories, any word emerging from Kingspan Stadium as to who's actually going to be taking this team forward? Because as you said, it doesn't really matter what's done off the field. The whole thing is built on the brand that's developed by success or otherwise on it. And right now, there's just no direction. It's rudderless because they don't have a leader.
Dave, I completely agree with you. And I would love to be able to sit here and tell you that Ulster have more or less got a new coach signed, sealed and delivered, and things are going to be a lot better for next season. But I think that's the main concern for everybody, is that nobody has a notion what's going on. All we're being told is that John O'Gibbs is leaving at the end of the season. They're doing a coaching review, that they're going to get somebody employed. There's names being bandied about, but nothing's concrete. So if I was Jordy Murphy, if I was other players wanting to come to Belfast, would I, if I was playing for another club, want to come to Belfast and play rugby in Belfast? Probably not, because it just seems like there's nothing there that would be a big attraction, especially what's going on and off the pitch over the last year. And when you don't have a head coach in charge, like, it's going to be very difficult for somebody like Bryn Cunningham to get recruitment and to get signings across the line, because they do need to strengthen the squad. They're losing a couple of key players this season. The whole balance of the squad is changing, the changing of the guard, really. But in saying that, you've got to look at the positive side and say that they have made a couple of shrewd signings with the likes of Jordy Murphy, who's going to be playing in a European Cup final in a couple of weeks' time. Younger players are starting to come through. Is Johnny McPhillips going to be a better player than Byrne or Carberry? Who knows? Is Byrne or Carberry got a better chance of playing for Ireland more often if they come and play for Ulster? So there's a lot to be juggled there, Dave. But at the minute, I totally agree with you. It's hard for Ulster Rugby to say, this is our product, come and play for us, we're on the up, because that's not the case. Of
course, the timing of it, Stephen, there probably is no worse a time to be looking for a head coach than the April of the year before a World Cup, because every head coach is tied up until after the World Cup. A lot of high-profile club coaches who feel they have a chance of coaching in the national game, well, they're looking at their situation thinking how many huge high-profile international jobs might be up for grabs after the World Cup. So there's no point signing a 2 or a 3 or a 4-year contract at a club like Ulster. And is there a need for some sort of an interim situation? A coach maybe with a lot of experience come in just for 12 or 18 months, and then you fish once again maybe in April of next year, when a lot of people might be willing to talk a little more openly about their immediate future?
I think you're possibly right. I think the Ulster Rugby recruitment process, when it comes to coaches, they don't want to make the same mistake again. If you look at the amount of coaches that have been and gone over the last 4 or 5 seasons, it is crazy. You know, you look at Alan Clark, who's let go. He's now the head coach of Ospreys. Neil Doak, he's away to Worcester next season. You know, Mark Anscombe, he left, he went to Canada. It just seems that Ulster needs stability. And if there is somebody to be brought in for 6 months, so if Ulster decide to say, look, we've done a review, we believe that there's nobody out there world-class enough to take Ulster to the next level, we're going to bring somebody in for next year or for one season, then I think everybody would be okay with that. But again, like, go back to the point.
Stephen?
Sorry?
Could Brian McLaughlin be looked at again?
Could he? Why not? Why not? He's doing a good job with Ballynahinch. They're doing reasonably well. There's talks of Soper from Banbridge, who's doing really well. Guys who are homegrown, who know what Ulster's all about. So, look, to be honest, and I think it's terrible sitting here, because I don't have a notion. I have no idea who's going to be in charge of Ulster Rugby next season.
The other thing is, like, whether
a tough thing.
Whether Brian McLaughlin would even want to go back, given the manager the
way the situation was left. I think when Brian McLaughlin was more or less sacked when he got Ulster Rugby to the European Cup final in 2012, I don't think he would just walk back into working for Shane Logan. That's for sure.
Yeah, the manner of he had to apologise for comments at the press conference. It was very messy, the whole thing at the end. So Carberry or Byrne, Stephen, which one do you want?
I'll flick a coin here, lads. I think Joey Carberry's a tremendous player. He's obviously been on the bench behind Johnny Sexton. For me, who is the better 10? I think I would go with Byrne. I think Joey Carberry's more versatile. He can play a lot of other positions, and I would just like to see somebody come in who's going to dominate that 10 jersey. And for me, Ross Byrne would do that more than Joey Carberry. What
about the premise of another Leinster guy coming into the squad, Stephen? Because myself and Aidan were talking about it before we came on air, and then immediately after we came on air. What is the tipping point in the eyes of a supporter as to how many non-Ulster men will be in your regular starting 15 before you decide, I don't want to go and watch this anymore?
Yeah, I know. It's something I've touched on, especially with Irish qualified players who are from South Africa. So you look at somebody like Vian Herbst, you look at Rob Herring, Robbie Diak, Sean Reedy, guys like that who, yes, they're Irish qualified, but they're not born and bred Ulster men. For me, growing up and playing Ulster 18s, 19s, 21s, coming the whole way through the system, there just doesn't seem to be as many of those guys coming through. And I know there is a lot of hard work. Yes, there is hard work being done in the academy, but I think everybody just kind of looks at what Leinster are producing and expects the same. I think everybody, Ulster fans, have got to be patient. But to go back to your point, it is frustrating. You know, you've guys like Alan O'Connor who would die to be in an Ulster shirt, but like he's born and bred in Leinster. You know, you have Clive Ross again. He's not from up north. Then you're bringing in Marty Moore. Then you've got Jordy Murphy. Then you've got John Cooney. You know, there's a third of your team that are from down south. And if you bring in an out half as well, then the fans start to go, right, okay, are we going to watch Ulster or are we going to watch Leinster B? And that's what people kind of talk about, and it's sad to say that.
A couple of things before we wrap, Stephen. There's been a lot of talk about the split, obviously, in the squad over the last while, and we've had the statement. It's hard to believe that everybody in the squad would have been behind the sentiment of that statement. What's your sense of this idea of a split in the squad and where it's at? Because this is another bit of a feature when we talk about this label of the basket case.
A split in the squad amongst the players, do you mean, Adrian?
That's apparently what's been spoken about, yeah.
Geez, I suppose looking from the outside in, I can't really comment too much on it because everything looks okay to me. The way the boys have been playing on the pitch, I'd have closer relationships to some of the older gents like Tommy Bowe and Rory Best and that, and I think they're just trying to keep their heads down. I think it's been a difficult 6 months, especially with it's all that's happened off the pitch. And they're just trying to keep their heads down and play some rugby. Is there a split? I think there might be a split between players and CEO. That's the only kind of split that I would imagine there would be because you know, the guy has promised a lot of things and hasn't really delivered. But when you talk about the players, Adrian, I think they're going to work hard together. And I know, listening to Jacob Stockdale's interview, he thinks that the adversity over the last number of months has almost brought them together more, and the word that he used was galvanised them. So I just go back to your point, Adrian, I can't see it, and you know, being around Belfast, it doesn't appear to be evident to me. No, and it doesn't look, as I did look at some of the attendances over the last few games, and it doesn't look like fans are particularly voting with their feet in terms of staying away. Like, it's 18,000 capacity, 16,000 for the Glasgow game, 13 at the Ospreys, 14.5 before that was the last game back in February for the Edinburgh game. Like, it doesn't look as if fans are particularly disengaged. Yeah, I think those numbers might be misleading slightly. Or, you know, just the amount of season tickets that probably, you know, were supposed to be there. Be that full on the night. Yeah. Right. Definitely at the Glasgow game there was, I'd say there was a few thousand off that, and all the talk has been about the renewing of the season tickets, and there's been campaigns on Twitter and social media in general just about not renewing their season tickets. And to be honest, there is a big stance against it, and it's going to be very, very interesting come the start of next season to see what the crowd capacities are going to be like, because a lot of people aren't happy with the way the two lads were dealt with, and you know, two homegrown Ulster Rugby lads who won't be playing for Ulster Rugby next season. It is a sad state of affairs, but that's another talking point. But yeah, the fans haven't been happy, and I think it would be difficult either way. I think you get a couple of thousand. If the lads were still playing for Ulster Rugby next year, there would be a couple of thousand that wouldn't turn up because they are, and vice versa. So it's a very, very tricky one, Adrian. Yeah, all right, Stephen, listen, you've been good with your time. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. No worries. Cheers, lads. Thanks as always. On the line there, cheers from Belfast, addressing the idea of an Ulster basket case or not. We've had a bunch of comments in on the topic. Harry Baird wondering about that balance of an overseas 10 versus, so developing a Johnny McPhillips versus bringing in a Bernard Carby, which we addressed. Greg O'Mara is wondering how long the rebuilding process will take. And David Hollywood, when a team puts the silencer on the media, they turn a megaphone onto themselves and their issues, and that really sums it up for me in terms of what's going on with Ulster at the minute. So we'll keep a keen eye on that for you. But we did want to, on the back of the various contacts that we've had during the week, bring you an Ulster Voice to get their take on that. It is 8:45 on this Friday morning. We've still loads to come. First up, we're going to, I think, hear from Kevin Kilbane in just a moment, if I'm right. We are. So before that, I'd mentioned Sean Dyche a little bit earlier. Here he is on the Keith Andrews show, picking his manager of the year.
Well, some of the positives that have been thrown at you this year have been links with other clubs. You've been talked about in terms of manager of the year, and I don't want to embarrass you by letting you talk about that.
Sorry, bring it on. You want to embarrass me.
Who would be your manager of the year?
See, I'm slightly different because my awareness of all of the divisions, in the sense I played in all of them, apart from the Premier League, but I played through the other three. I think John Coleman down the road at Accrington's done an amazing job. I think Neil Harris has done an amazing job anyway. But if they get there to the playoffs and then if they win it, well, that's out of this world. Yeah, that's out of this world. Pep, for obvious reasons. I mean, don't get me wrong. Pep has done a fantastic job. I like the fact, and I don't know him, but from the outside looking in, I think he learnt a lot from last season. I think rightly so, a club like Man City kept that manager, because in other countries, even in this country, if you're 15 points off the title, you could have been outed. Now, that would have been ridiculous, but it happens. And I think it seems to me from the outside looking at it, he's learned about his team. He's gone back to a similar format that he had at Barcelona, about 10 years ago. Very much 4-3-3 orientated, fewer changes, reliant on the hardcore of top players, and then still changing when needs be, playing some great football, gluing it all together they've got a will and demand. There's a respect there, a teamship, if you like, that counts, and of course some fantastic football. So he is the obvious candidate, make no mistake. But behind that, I do marvel at managers who are making a lot out of a situation when they haven't always got that much. And John and Neil Harris, and amongst many others out there doing good work. But them three guys, I personally think, for many different reasons, had fantastic seasons.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
Great stuff from Sean Dyche, the Ginger Mourinho, on with Keith Andrews on the show this week and over the last couple of weeks. Check out that full piece on our page on YouTube. Kevin Kilbane, good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian. How are you keeping?
Very well. You've taken the jersey off. Fair play. Laundry's been done.
Yeah, it's all off. It's off, yeah. No, I've got it back today. It's all sorted. It was nice hearing Sean Dyche talking about John Coleman there and Neil Harris, people that you would never have heard of, Adrian, as I listened last week to the Keith Andrews show.
Well, you see, exactly. I was going to put you right there, but to be fair, you've corrected yourself before you get yourself.
Well, no, I listened to the show, and as a man who studies the game, as you like to tell me that you do, you've no knowledge of the game at all. So that's all.
I wouldn't be as much of a football manager yourself, Kev. I mean, that's quite clear.
No. Well, you like to tell me that you are. That's all. But anyway, that's fine.
He's come out all guns blazing this morning.
This is generally what happens.
He knows he's only on for 8 or 9 minutes, so he's not wasting any time.
You know when Kev hasn't been out the night before, when he's dishing out all sorts of shades of smoke on a Friday morning.
You're on the money this morning, I tell you. Honestly.
Right, Arsenal last night, we've just been having some conversation about it here earlier on, 1-1 against Atletico Madrid. My sense in watching the players afterwards, I mean, apart from the fact that, as Dave pointed out rightly earlier on, they were by far the better team and really should have won the game, I would have thought about 3-0. Outside of all of that, looking at the players afterwards and listening to Arsene Wenger, some of what he was saying afterwards, I kind of got the sense that everybody thinks this tie is dead. Is it?
Well, it's not dead. Of course it's not dead. And I think they proved last night, albeit against 10 men after 10 minutes, with Atletico going down to 10 men, that they can actually outplay them. They can outpass them at times. I just think the way that they play, Dave and it was actually that game last night drew comparisons a little bit to me. Dave and I were at the Barcelona-Atletico Madrid game, probably about 3 seasons ago now, in Barcelona. Fernando Torres put Atletico in front, and then he was sent off about 5 or 10 minutes later. And it was the way that they defended in so spells through. I think they've got that about them, Atletico, where they can do it, but I think they've got a firepower. Diego Costa's probably going to be back for that second leg. So maybe in answer to your question at the start, it's certainly not dead, but I just feel it is, because I just think that Atletico have got too much for Arsenal.
Yeah, they have this clinical edge, Kev, don't they? They're in their element when they have 1 or 2 of Griezmann, Costa and Torres on the field, but they have to defend. They loved the position they were forced into last night. The likes of Godin, the likes of Juan Fran, Lucas Hernandez, they love getting their blocks in, they love getting the tackles in, they love the organisation it takes when everything seems to be going against them, and this siege mentality seems to just descend upon them, given the smallest recipe, the smallest ingredients, and then you just need that one chance. And if Griezmann gets 3 or 4 good chances, he's probably going to take 2 or 3 of them, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, well, that's what they were doing, Dave. You're right. They were still creating chances at times off the back of that brilliant defending. It's, we've heard it said before in recent seasons that the art of real good defending is going out of the game. We've seen it from Juve, and we've seen it from Atletico in the last 3 or 4 seasons of the Champions League. They're kind of the benchmark of how to defend as a unit, as individuals. They're brilliant at it, and they love it. You can see it's being done on the training ground every single day. They're probably doing 2-on-2 situations. They're probably doing 4-on-4s. Come and break us down. Or maybe even probably 6-on-4s, 6 attacking players against 4 defenders, sitting in tight, defending as a unit. How are we going to stop these sides that have got an overload against us? You can see it constantly. But the one thing that they do carry is they never, if I maybe look at it in comparison, I think we've all sat in studio, we've been critical of maybe an Irish side over the years for defending like that, defending deep. Where's the outball? The outball is a long punt forward, and there's no one able to retain possession. Whereas Atletico, they're different. When they get the ball in their own final third, they're able to keep hold of it for 4 or 5 seconds, pick a couple of passes out, and then they get bodies in advanced position. So it's quite methodical how they actually break from deep line positions. And I personally like watching sides play like that, because I think it's great counter-attacking football and really exciting stuff to watch.
Kev, let's get there's been a lot of conversation about Liverpool, so let's not necessarily trail over that game particularly, but the 5-2 lead, obviously, they carry into the second leg against Roma. But the question that sort of stood out for me about Liverpool as we reflect on the European week is whether you're sort of seeing the levels of progression at the club that is going to see them contend in a way for the title that they haven't done since the slip. Like, I mean, if you look at the breakdown of the points differential between Liverpool and the teams who've won the Premier League between that season, like, they're vast. They're frequently in the sort of 20-point range. Are you seeing the sort of progression that's going to see that reduce right down next season?
Well, yeah, in a word, yes, because of what they've probably achieved against City this season. They've been the better side on 3 of the 4 occasions that they've played them. But the one thing you'd say is it's Liverpool. We've got to this stage of the season, or even at the start of the next season, when it's full of hope again, and every Liverpool fan are thinking, right, this is going to be our season. We only need to look back 2 or 3 seasons where after Brendan Rodgers' brilliant season that they had, and they weren't able to replicate that. It does seem to me it's a bit different now. I think they've got players within that squad that's able to go and seriously compete, but it's the level that they play at. Can they produce it for 38 Premier League games? 15 Champions League games, 16 Champions League games, the cup games? It might have to be they're going to have to drop having a go at one competition. I know that they went out against West Brom in the FA Cup this season, but you can't be critical, because look at what's happened to City this season. I think it's caught up with them just simply by going for every single competition. I don't think you can do it. I don't think they have the depth within the squad, most do, to compete maybe for 2 trophies. But I just don't think they can actually seriously go and have a crack at 4 competitions. The priority has to be Premier League and Champions League. So in answer to what you're saying, I think they are in a position to seriously challenge because of the players that they've got and the way that they're playing. And maybe more importantly, is the atmosphere that's generated now around Anfield is unbelievable. And that's what's been generated every single week. So when the likes of Bournemouth, the game that I was at the other week, are coming to town and they're trying to sit in deep and defend against Liverpool, Liverpool's atmosphere at the start of the game, the tempo they're playing at, they're just blowing them away. And I think that's maybe the key to it, that they're going to be able to blow away the sides that sit in deep against them quite early on in matches and put them to bed.
It's interesting you mentioned Bournemouth there, Kev, because for me the difference, certainly since Christmas with Liverpool, is that they're no longer vulnerable against the lesser sides, against the weaker sides. Their top 6 record under Klopp has been excellent since he's taken charge, but you always felt they could get turned over at home by a Benteke-inspired Palace, or a Southampton might take a point off them, or a Burnley, for example, who've hurt them in the last couple of years. I don't sense that Liverpool are actually in that position anymore, that by and large, if a team from the bottom half of the table arrives at Anfield, they're going to concede 3 or 4. Liverpool are going to win those games, and if the season started at Christmas, they would be so close to Manchester City, and that's what they'll be able to prove again come August and onwards.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the flip side of that, Dave, you could probably look to last week against West Brom, where they were in control of the game, they get 2 up, and then they were sloppy, they conceded from 2 set pieces. So you could make the argument that, look at West Brom, look what they did there. But I am with you, I'm totally with you, because I think the games that I've seen them against maybe lesser sides this season, I was at the Swansea game last year and I was at the Crystal Palace game last year, 2 games that they lost, and they went and played open and expansive football, and sides were able to contain them, defending deep, and there was a way to pick them off. There's pace now within that back line and awareness. You only need to look at Van Dijk. Virgil van Dijk is, even if players, I mean, I'm talking the quickest of the quick attacking players in the Premier League and world football, you're talking Aguero, you're talking Jesus, you're talking Lukaku, whoever it is, if they're on the wrong side of them and they're in at goal, Van Dijk's got the pace to get back and get back to them. So Liverpool will continue to play open and expansive. They will continue to take a risk and maybe leave one-on-ones. But there's no better defender than Van Dijk in one-on-one position. So they have that luxury of having better players now. I still feel as though they've maybe got to replace Lovren, and I still feel Karius needs replacing. And then you've almost got a perfect 11. They probably need a perfect 15 or 16, though, to add to that.
We might tease out that Karius point and on, because I know that a lot of people have been pretty impressed with him this season, Kev. But they have Stoke. Obviously, it's a game that's live on todayfm.com tomorrow lunchtime. It'll be interesting to see what Klopp's approach in terms of a squad will be for that game tomorrow. But one of the other games we wanted to get your thoughts on, United Arsenal on Sunday. It seems it's hard to know about these two clubs, and particularly from an Arsenal context and everything that's going on there at the minute. But it seems like such a long time ago, and indeed it is, since Wenger's "everyone thinks they've got the prettiest wife at home" comment in relation to United's team at the time, and Ferguson's defence of them. What are your thoughts in the lead into this game? I mean, it's not exactly a sort of title contender game, but what are your thoughts heading into it?
No, Dave and I are at the game Sunday. It's not the sort of game that gets the juices flowing. It's not that game that you're really looking forward to, like it probably has been perhaps maybe even 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, I suppose, as well, since it was really that meaningful game. Arsenal's record at Old Trafford has been dreadful. Arsene Wenger's record against Jose Mourinho is dreadful as well. So you look at it, the way that they played midweek, and you've already spoken about maybe the negativity around Wenger post-match Atletico last night. I feel as though it's a Man United win. I just think United, the way that Mourinho's played these top 6 matches, the way that he's got the best out of his side, it's all about the FA Cup for them now. If they win the game at the weekend, regardless, I mean, they could actually go into this game if Swansea were to beat Chelsea on Saturday, guaranteed of top 4 anyway. If they win the match, regardless of that result, they're in the top 4 for next season. So Champions League is guaranteed. It's all about the FA Cup for them. But I just personally think Arsenal just don't have enough when they're going away from home. Is it 5 on the bounce now? I think David may be correct. I think it's five on the bounce. The worst record in English football away from home in 2018. It's just been dreadful stuff from them, and I don't see it changing this week, and I think United have got too much for them.
Yeah, I think it's their worst record on the road in the league in 94 years. Plus, Kev, Arsenal, it doesn't really matter what happens on Sunday. Their entire season is what happens at the Metropolitano on Thursday. I wonder, will Wenger make changes? Will he rest guys? Because they could lose 6 or 7-0 on Sunday afternoon. That'll be fairly forgotten pretty quickly if they were somehow managed to go to Madrid and pull something out of the bag.
No, spot on. Davey has to make changes. He has to prioritise that Atletico Madrid game now. They're gone top 4. That was long gone, hasn't it? They're nowhere near it. They've been nowhere near it for the last few seasons. You look at it, even when Leicester won the league, yes, they finished second, but they got to February, March time and they were gone. They just had that great run that actually, I think, maybe papered over cracks and looked better than it actually was across the course of that season. They have to prioritise this game. It is about maybe going to Atletico on Thursday with as fresh a side as possible. So, yeah, he will certainly make changes. He'll probably bring Aubameyang back in, which is understandable given that he'll be suspended for the next game. And I personally think that it will be a much changed side. That's what maybe stacks it more heavily in favour of Man United.
Just very briefly, Kev, before we let you go, we're going to talk to George Caulkin in just a few minutes about one of your former clubs and the state they're in. Briefly, your thoughts on what's happening at Sunderland at the minute?
Well, I'm gutted. I mean, I didn't have my best first couple of seasons there at Sunderland. Maybe not the best of times overall, but it's such a huge club, and I can't get away from that. Kenny and I were talking about it with Joe on air on Off the Ball the other night, Wednesday evening, and it is a huge club, and you can't get away from that fact. It's one of the biggest in English football, and it's just been dreadful the way that it's gone. It's been on a slow decline now for 10 years, you'd have to say. The relegation scraps that they've had in staying up, much as I spoke about maybe Arsene Wenger's Arsenal side papering over cracks. This has been a far worse scenario with Sunderland, how it's gone this season, given the squad that they've got, given the budget they've got. I'll talk about budgets a little bit really in relation to sides. They should be nowhere near it, and it's been a totally dreadful season, and that's largely been down to the negativity that's set in for a long time now that's not been able to be reversed.
Thanks, Kev.
Cheers, lads. Have a good day.
Kevin Kilbane there, live from Kevin Kilbane Towers in Manchester, and he'll be live alongside Dave on Off the Ball on News Talk on Sunday for full live and exclusive commentary of
We didn't really sell it as we should have done there.
And Arsenal. Well, you saying, well, I'm not sure Arsenal are going to put their full team. Of course they are, Dave.
But you should really tune in this Sunday afternoon.
Information suggested that's exactly what's going to happen. Right, it's 9 o'clock on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us. We've a whole bunch of comments coming in about various bits and pieces. Keep them coming in. Ollie Manning on Facebook says careers are short. Surely playing regular rugby is always a good thing. Seems like a reasonable enough point. The biggest paper trouble and talk is coming from Southern pundits and press, says Liam Scullion. It's a fuss that's not of Ulster's making is maybe the inherent thing there, I'm not sure. Also a point about Byrne not getting playing time in Leinster, saying he had to go to the Scarlets. And did the Southern pundits cry then, Dave? Were they up in arms? Slightly different scenario.
Well, I don't think you can equate Tadhg Byrne in terms of where his career was when he left to Joey Carbery right now, who is the second best 10 in Joe Schmidt's eyes, is playing regularly for Ireland and winning big things with Ireland and huge tests. Tadhg Byrne wasn't known to very many people outside of Leinster circles when he left the province and went to Scarlet. I don't think you can, it's apples and oranges in that one.
Keep your comments coming in, 9 o'clock on this Friday morning. Hashtag OTB AM. Get your comments here on the Facebook page, YouTube channel, wherever it is that you're consuming us this morning. Now, we had 2 former Sunderland players in studio on Wednesday. We're going to speak to George Caulkin of the Times of London in just a few minutes to get his thoughts on the state of Sunderland's demise. But first of all, here's Kenny Cunningham and Kevin Kilbane's take on the state of the club.
There's been too much play in terms of Ellis Short. He wants to sell the football club. He's an absolute owner, and a huge amount of criticism been levelled at this. It's been too much for me, because I think as a player and a manager, you've got to detach yourself away from that. And you've mentioned there, you look at the quality of players in that squad, that they're underachieving that group of players. So you've got to ask yourself why different managers have gone in there and haven't been able to get a tune out of them. Now, why is that? Some decent managers as well. Chris Coleman, who I regard highly, he's kind of intimated, Kev, on a couple of occasions in terms of maybe the attitude of a core group of players in there, maybe the more experienced players, the players on those big wages, in terms of maybe their commitment to the club and around the dressing room. So there must be something there. Because if they're focused and they're at it and they're given the kind of commitment that you would expect, the individual quality and the experience they have in that squad, you wouldn't expect them to be there. So there's a problem there in the dressing room. I'd still be optimistic. If I was Chris Coleman, I'd be hanging around. I wouldn't be looking to get out, and I'd actually stick with him, Chris Coleman, because that football club, Kev, that's a huge football club. Honestly, God, I was only there very short. I wouldn't. You know, so I'm a big Sunderland man. I was there for 9 months, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed the club, the people, the supporters. It's massive, people were criticising, why is Chris Coleman going to Sunderland? He's struggling in the Championship. But I couldn't, straight away, I thought, I can understand it. That's a massive football. If you can turn that club around and get it going, get a bit of momentum, get that mojo back around the club, the sky's the limit for that football club. So, dark moments at the moment, but still for me potentially a bright future.
I think the problem being as well, Kenny talked about moving people on, whether it be sky high wages, they're actually paying massive Championship wages as it stands. League One wages, it's just off the scale. So that's the thing.
And they don't seem to put in certain clauses. Rodwell is on 40 grand a week next season in League One. The average salary is about but he was on
70 this season, hasn't he? He's been on 70 this season, so it's just crazy.
Yeah, so Sunderland are about to drop out of the Championship. It's been confirmed as of last weekend and into League One. And to discuss their demise over the last number of years, I'm delighted to say we're joined on the line by George Caulkin of the Times of London. Morning, George.
Good morning.
Thanks a lot for taking the call this morning. A defeat to obviously Burton Albion last weekend was the one that finally did for them to confirm their drop. I read that Darren Bent goal from last weekend described as the final wound of 1,000 different cuts, which I thought was a nice line. Can you give us a bit of a sense as to what some of those cuts were and how Sunderland have found themselves in this position?
Yeah, where do you start? I mean, you sort of look for turning points at Sunderland and you sort of drive yourself dizzy, really. I mean, the sort of irony of Darren Bent, I suppose, was that he was the player that came to Sunderland under Steve Bruce that sort of agitated on Twitter to join Sunderland. He was an England international, actually wanting to go to the Stadium of Light, and that was seen as a big moment in the club's development. And for him to be the kind of player that almost, I mean, you know, not actually, but sort of virtually sent them down was kind of very ironic, really. Listening to sort of Kev Kilbane there sort of talk about the decline of 10 years. I mean, it's sort of quite interesting, that, isn't it? Because they were in the Premier League for a decade, and ostensibly that's successful. But they became known for hanging on and hanging on and hanging on. And they also sort of almost, that almost became sort of part of Sunderland's myth and identity was hanging on. And they described that as miracles. Well, I'm sorry, that's not a miracle. I mean, what Leicester did was a miracle. What Nottingham Forest did under Brian Clough was a miracle. Hanging on and giving yourself the right to lose again the next season is not a miracle. But they sort of almost believed, I think, in their own sort of sense of mythology about that, and it gave them the excuse just to go launch themselves on the same cycle. I mean, you know, the number of managers, 11 managers, whatever it is, over the last 10 years, each of them coming in with different ideas, wanting new players, those same players not having the chance to settle, be given a system or tactics that they can sort of understand, and then the cycle beginning again when it failed, which it sort of obviously did. So this sense of failure has been entrenched for a long time now. I certainly didn't foresee them kind of going straight back down again, but it takes a lot to kind of get out of a cycle like that. This is statistically the worst season in their history, which is extraordinary when you think about it. They've been down in the third tier once before, but they actually won 12 league games that season and went down through a playoff. And this time they've won 2 home league games since December 2016, which is extraordinary, really. Yeah. So although there's this kind of narrative of thousands of fans not turning up, I mean, I think the more extraordinary part of it is those that still do turn up. Yeah. And I think that's why Sunderland, although, you know, it's a very dark time for them at the moment, they will always still have hope and potential because of the number of people that still care about the club, because of the number of people that still go. As Kev and Kenny rightly said there, it's a magnificent football. Anyway, you talk, because I'll just rant on all day.
We'll happily listen, George. You know that. You mentioned the history of the club, and we might get to the attendances in a minute in terms, and particularly the future of this thing, but the history of the club, 138 years old, and the owner, Ellis Short, has been there for the last decade, and he's fired, and I guess hired and fired, a third of the club's entire managerial history over that period of time, which is an extraordinary stat. And there comes a point, it strikes me, that over that, it begins to reflect worse on the owner than it does really on any of the managers. And if patience is a virtue, it doesn't seem like one that Ellis Short particularly possesses.
No, absolutely no. It's a catalogue of absolute chronic mismanagement, and he has been an absolutely catastrophic owner for the club. There's no doubt about that. He got away with it for too long, and I think he got away with it because, precisely because he did change managers. So blame was almost sort of a shifting target, really. But sort of even worse than that was that there's never been a plan, or if there's been a plan, they've never stuck to it. They haven't stuck to it for more than a few months. So, when Steve Bruce comes, Martin O'Neill comes in, okay, so the experienced manager doesn't work, and in inverted commas, so then they bring in a young coach with a director of football. That was Paolo Di Canio. I love that quote from Martin O'Neill, that managerial charlatan he called him not long after taking the Republic job. And then that didn't work, so then they go for something else. Then they go for an experienced manager. They have a sporting director. Then they get rid of that and bring in Sam Allardyce, and they've just veered from one thing to another. There's been absolutely no consistency whatsoever, and people have been put in positions that they're not qualified for. And what that's meant is, effectively, every time that a new manager has come in, the first thing he has to do is clear up the mess that the previous one has made, or he's inherited from the previous regime, and wants to bring in his own players, wants to bring in his own staff, wants to bring in his own system. One of the kind of really sort of painful things about this season has been seeing Chris Coleman do exactly the same thing that Simon Grayson had done a few months earlier. Oops, sorry, lost you there. Going through the same sort of tactical mistakes, and fans can see it and journalists can see it, but Coleman sort of has to do it because he's going through every single playbook he's got in order to try and get a result or a response.
And isn't there something in that, George, in terms of when we speak about the ownership of the club and the director of football, because in the face of that isn't necessarily the worst plan in the world in terms of trying to, if you're going to have that many managers, at least you've got some sort of consistent thread. Even in terms of the transfer policy of the club, I've looked back at it over the last 10 years, and the standout players who were in the top of their form who've come into that club are not many. You mentioned Darren Bent, Mignolet, Sessegnon, John O'Shea did his bit, Marcus Alonso, Defoe did brilliantly. The list of players who've been on the polar opposite end of that are many. It seems as if, even outside of the turnover of managers, that constant thread of somebody ideally the owner of the club or a football director who could have oversight and can say to Chris Coleman, listen, you're doing the same thing that Simon Grayson did, we need to do things slightly differently, is sadly absent.
Yeah, and when they've gone down that path, it hasn't been a success. So they brought in, Roberto De Fanti at the same time as Di Canio, and he brought in, I think, 14 players, and they were disastrous. It was disastrous, and then he left, and Lee Congerton came in, and I got to know Lee Congerton kind of fairly well, but he was the person that signed Jack Rodwell, and sort of told me at the time that they were signing a future England captain. But I think it's these quicksand foundations. If you have quicksand foundations, it's very difficult to build anything. And so everybody has sort of suffered, but everybody is also partly responsible for what's happened too. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a director of football or a sporting director, but A, they have to be qualified for the job, and B, they have to be given time to sort of to put a system in place, and nobody has had that chance. You look at the managers that the club have had over the years, whether it's Steve Bruce and Martin O'Neill, Allardyce. There have been some very good managers there. David Moyes. It's not to say that they were at the peak of their powers when they came to the club, but they can't all be wrong. And there's only one. There is only one sort of common thread amongst everything, and that is Short's ownership. And he keeps the club ticking over in the sense that they're still in existence, but he's absolutely turned his back on them.
Well, are we getting to the point, George, now where you can talk about slightly trivial matters, that is the managerial revolving door and the fact that they're going to be playing their matches in League One next season, but they'll still be playing football matches. But are we now looking at the possibility that the actual future of the club is now in jeopardy a little, because he's losing $500,000 a week, can't get someone to take the club off his hands? Eventually, he is just going to decide, I cannot be sticking with this anymore, and I'm just going to cut my losses and get out of here without getting somebody else to take the debt off me, which is what he wants. When do we arrive in that area where the very existence of Sunderland as a football club is actually in danger?
Well, I don't think we're at that point. Yet, and certainly, the chief executive Martin Bain has said this week that administration or anything like that is not a threat. That's not part of the agenda, and that kind of Short is committed to the club in that sense. And this descent has been so sort of rapid and so headlong that, of course, you have to have that kind of stuff in the back of your head. Obviously, the debt is so high, but we can only trust what the club say to us, I suppose, in these moments, and they're reassuring that administration is not part of the agenda. But they're desperate for new owners. They're desperate for leadership. I spoke to someone at the club 3 or 4 weeks ago who sort of said he'd put his house on there being new owners by the start of next season. But we're getting to the point now where that needs to be happening right now, effectively. I was at Chris Coleman's press conference yesterday, and he was sort of saying they should be, the day they get relegated, the day after that should be the start of next season, effectively. You know what I mean? They should be really making plans to do that. And it was a kind of horrible quote, but he sort of said, this is Sunderland and we're wandering aimlessly around in the dark at the minute. And that is the concern. There is an opportunity next season to win matches, to be the biggest club in the division, to reinvent themselves, but they need a change in ownership in order to be able to do that.
Yeah,
to have no plan at this stage is really frightening.
And he's indicated that he might stay on as well. George, I wondered, we spoke about earlier on, about 10 years ago, I'd spent a few days around the area, and it was the time just after Ellis Short had come in. Roy Keane was manager, Niall Quinn was chairman, and Niall showed me around the club. The spirit around the place was unbelievable. The spirit around the city was unbelievable. It was tangible. There was a real connection, a proper tangible connection between the club and the city. I wonder, you touched on it earlier, but if you might expand on it slightly, a city that's going through its own troubles at the moment, I wonder what that relationship is like at the minute.
Well, it's stretched to the point of translucency. I think that is the key. Sunderland should be an absolute beacon of the region. It should be a beacon for the city. It should hold up everything that's good about the place. And at the minute, it's everything that's worse about the place. It was funny, actually. Chris Coleman said yesterday that they'd actually done a Player of the Year awards ceremony this week, which obviously is kind of cringeworthy. And he sort of said they went, and that the players actually got a good reception from fans and things like that. They're doing these events and they're being lifted by the fans as opposed to fans lifting as opposed to them lifting fans. It's absolutely a reverse of the usual relationship where, it's the city and fans who are the best of Sunderland as opposed to the club itself. I mean, no, you're right. I mean, I should have mentioned Roy before. I mean, I was around obviously reporting on the club when Roy and Niall were there, and Roy was absolutely what the club needed. He lit a spark under the city. All those sort of characteristics which we know so well, that sort of ferocious ambition, that sort of, absolute refusal to sort of accept excuses was just exactly what Sunderland needed. They needed somebody to sort of raise their heads and look upwards, and that's that is absolutely what they need now. And of course they had that at the same time as Niall, who was able to sort of articulate what, despite being an outsider, was able to articulate what Sunderland means, what Wearside means, what the North East means, and put it into some perspective. And they've had an absolute failure of leadership. Coleman, I think Coleman's good. He the thing that sort of was depressing about David Moyes' time at the club, not only were they awful and not only did they go down, but there was that sense that he was doing Sunderland a favour, that having sort of rejected them 3 or 4 times before, finally they'd got their man, but he was there reluctantly. The nice thing about Chris Coleman is that he desperately wants to be at Sunderland. He's spoke to Kevin Ball, who's a big friend of his, and found out about the club. He's moved his family up lock, stock and barrel. He did have that high profile after Wales and things like that, and desperately wants to be there. That's what Sunderland need. They need, again, to be reminded about what a fantastic football club is, what a historic football club is, and they need to kind of completely rebuild, but they're doing it from a very low base.
Yeah, you're right about Roy Keane, by the way. Whenever there's an opportunity to mention him, we should take it. It did strike me as well that around that time there was a lot of criticism of Roy not living in Sunderland, and I do remember him making a comment about Ellis Short not living there either, which was a telling one in itself. Just before we wrap, and as we wrap, George, what's the future here? What's going to happen? There's not a lot of utterances necessarily coming from the ownership of the club this week. What's the future for Sunderland?
No, we haven't heard anything from him. Well, that's the $1 million question. I mean, I know that that sort of interested parties in the club have been kind of shown around and looking around, but we don't know who they are. We don't know what their sort of motivations are.
Is Niall Quinn one of them? He's definitely been mentioned.
Well, Niall has been advising possible groups, but no, he's not. He insists that he's not directly involved in it. His business life is very active elsewhere, so I don't think he would be part of the day-to-day running of the club again. Although never say never, and don't rule that out in the future necessarily. But they're on the cusp of a very different existence. League One will be very, very different to the Championship and the Premier League. I've been to Accrington this season, for example. I mean, it's sheds. I mean, effectively, and I mean that very affectionately. But and it's going to be a real grind. As I say, it doesn't have to be the end of the club. It can be the start of something. But there needs to be sort of ambition in the boardroom, and there needs to be a sense of purpose, and there really needs to be a sense of who Sunderland are and could be. It's not enough to be clinging on. Sunderland, I mean, nobody has a divine right to anything, but as the two lads said earlier, Sunderland is a magnificent football club. It really is. It has the potential to be something special, but they have to first remember what they are and what they could be, and clinging on. Sunderland should be about more than just clinging on.
Yeah, they probably need some of the leadership of that man over your right shoulder there. George, thanks a million for taking the call this morning.
Cheers, lads. Thanks you.
George Caulkin of the Times of London there on the sad demise, I think is probably the best way to put it, of Sunderland AFC. We shall follow their progress on it. They were at one point obviously everybody's second team, in a way that Burnley are slightly, maybe not quite at the same degree. I mean, Niall Quinn and Roy Keane were involved, so obviously there was that little extra wrinkle that we don't quite have at Burnley.
For those who were listening on offtheball.com, it was a photo of Bobby Robson over George's right shoulder, and they could do with the brilliance of Bobby at his best to try and dig them out of the mess they're in.
OTB AM is brought to you this morning with Air, the home of Air Sport. You can get amazing live sporting content free with Air Broadband. We did promise you that we were going to go on a world record OTB AM this morning, and that's exactly where we're headed. It's 9:20 on this Friday morning, and on we go, because we're going to be joined in studio very shortly to mark your card for day 4 of the Punchestown Festival by John Duggan, so stay with us for that. But before that, Dublin hurling captain Chris Crummy was speaking to Darren Cleary at the launch of the Leinster Hurling Championship.
Is it a happier camp in 2018 than it was towards the end of 2017?
I wouldn't really say it's a happier camp, because I think it was a happy camp, to be honest with you. From the last few years, absolutely, it's great to have a few of the lads that are back in. It's very important that you have your best players available to you, and it can only bode well. We have a great blend of youth and experience within the camp this year.
In the short term, what do Dublin need to do to constitute success? Success this year may not be a medal or silverware. What would mark success? How do you mark it?
To be honest with you, we're success. We're looking at that Kilkenny game, and we're not really looking any further. If you can just get a win there, you can build momentum. We're going out every game this year to win and put in performance, and hopefully, if we do that, the results will follow, and the silverware as well.
Assess the dangers of Kilkenny for us.
Kilkenny are a great team with some fantastic players and a great manager, and proven over the last few years. To be honest with you, they're just such a hard-working team, and we know that if we have any chance of beating them, we're going to have to work a lot harder than they do in Parnell Park. But it's a massive challenge, and something that we're really looking forward to getting out. You want to play the best teams. Kilkenny league champions, they're the benchmark at the moment, and that's who you want to be playing in the first game, and we're confident we put in performance, we get the result. There's no pressure on us going into Parnell Park. A lot of people are writing us off already, and that's not a bad way to go in. But to be honest with you, we don't really look too much outside the camp. We just focus on ourselves, and we know, and we have a lot of belief in ourselves and in our players and in our management setup, that if we get things right, that we'll get the result as well.
Yeah, it's Chris Crummy in conversation there with Darren Cleary. Now it is 9:22 on this Friday morning. Lots of comments coming in, so keep them coming. #OTBAM or on your feed here as well. I am delighted to say that we are joined, as we have been every day this week, in studio to reflect and look ahead to day 4 at Punchestown by John Duggan. Good morning to you, John.
Adrian and Dave, good morning.
How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks, yeah.
It's obviously, most of the narrative this week is focused on really only one story, and it's been an incredible story. A story of essentially €1 million swing from one to the other, and it's Willie Mullins in the box seat here.
It is, yeah, against Gordon Elliott for the trainer's title, and Gordon has become the first trainer this season ever to train over 200 winners, but it's not enough, in that it was a €400,000 lead for Gordon going into Tuesday. Now it's a €424,148 lead for Willie Mullins, who's won 12 of the 22 races, and all 12 of those winners have been with different owners. I think that's really the reason why he's going to win the trainer's title. If you had Gordon Elliott training 12 winners at Punchestown, I'd say the majority of them would be from Dickinstown house stud Michael O'Leary. So Willie has the variety and the depth, and Willie has just got a great record at Punchestown. I think he's been top trainer there 15 times. This will be his 12th title. He's going to win the title, I think. And looking back now, the 5-4 that was offered before the week probably was the best of the week. You didn't need to back any horses this week. You just needed to back Willie Mullins to retain the title.
Not turnaroundable is what you're saying.
I don't think so.
Mathematically it is, but
mathematically it is, but I know Samcro might win today for Gordon Elliott in the feature, but Willie's just got too much going on. And like yesterday we saw with Faheen and Footpad winning both Grade 1s, that he just keeps on amassing the money.
John, when he lost the Duggan contract, what was your immediate thought at the time for the future of Willie Mullins and his stable? Did you think that he'd be able to continue in the way that he has and still be in this position where he's going to ride off into the sunset with yet another trainer's title?
I did, because the Dugganstown Willie Mullins connection was relatively recent up to that. So I'd felt that Willie's been at the game a long time. People are got to remember that Willie Mullins has been at this game for 3 decades, and he had his first Cheltenham winner in 1995, and it's only in the last 10 years that he has become this dominant force in the game, until Gordon has arrived with the support of Dugganstown. I think it's good for the game, because I think if Willie Mullins still had Dugganstown with him, I think there'd be just one Joe in town. There'd be a monopoly. There would be a monopoly. So I always felt he had the talent in terms of the people in the yard, like Harold Kirk, and the people like Ruby, David Casey, Paul Tannen, that are all, and we're talking about, that's probably up to 100 people. I don't know if it is 100, but that work there down in Close Sutton in Carlow. So he had good owners before. Remember Florida Pearl, Archie O'Leary, and Rich Ritchie there, and he's got Graham Wiley. He also lost Alan Potts out of the yard as well, and that was a blow. But I always felt he had enough strength and depth, as it were, Dave, to cope with that. But it's been great for Gordon.
O'Leary's fascinating when he talks about this stuff, because he always says, well, look, if Willie would just drop his prices a bit, I'd go back to him tomorrow, which is an incredible sort of kick in the balls for Gordon Elliott in a lot of ways. Is he ever going back there, do you think?
Well, first of all, is it completely about prices? That's the question I would ask.
Right, okay.
Is it about that? That's a question I would definitely ask myself.
I ask tentatively what else it might be about.
We don't know, but we do know that I think it's got very competitive. This rate, like that Samcro is running in the champion hurdle. It's not something that they normally do. Run a novice in a champion race. So that just shows how competitive it is, and that's good. So look, we don't know what went on behind the scenes, but these people are strong characters. Michael Leary's a very strong character. Wouldn't be so successful in business if he wasn't. And Willie Mullins is a very strong character in Irish racing, because we know with so many trainers going to the wall, we've seen like Charlie Swan and Sandra Hughes give up their training careers in recent years, that this is a very competitive game. And the fact that they've taken 10 million out of the market in prize money since last autumn just shows that if you're not Willie Mullins or Gordon Elliott, you're struggling to make it pay.
But you say it's a very competitive game. It's becoming increasingly uncompetitive, is it not?
Yeah.
Is that not a worry for the long-term future of grassroots training and development of the industry in this country? Because essentially, maybe if things continue the way they are, you're going to have 2 trainers. It's not competitive at all.
It's competitive in terms of the amount of horses. Well, I suppose Joseph O'Brien has got JB McManus behind him, and I think that's significant. So. Okay. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think we're very competitive when it comes to like Aintree and Cheltenham, and we've had 17 winners at Cheltenham this year, and that 10 years ago would have been 10 years ago it might have been seen as a really brilliant year, but 20 years ago it would have been seen as completely it never could happen. So it's great for Irish racing that we've gone to the Melbourne Cup and won, that we've gone to Cheltenham and won, that we won the Grand National again and had the first 3 in the Grand National. But I do get your point that where are the syndicates? Where are the stories that, the 20, 30 people in the winners' enclosure and the kind of the characters, like remember Peter Casey training Flemenstar there and going on television and saying kind of naughty things. Or Denoli in the 90s when the trainer had never even got on a plane before. These kind of stories are becoming less and less prevalent, and I think that what I'd love to see at a racing meeting like Punchestown today is not 11 runners in the same colours. I'd actually love to see a 30-runner handicap hurdle for 100,000 or 200,000 and incentives for syndicates and that kind of thing. So I do think, you're right that like on the flat, it's all about big business and breeding, and it's all about the Ballydoyle and the people from the Gulf states, and we can very much see the same colours, and it's very much about a limited number of owners that can afford to have these flat horses. And the worry is that the jumps was always was more democratic almost. It was more about you could actually have a dream of a Cheltenham winner. Now I think that dream is fading. So that will be a bit of a concern. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, that the prize money is fantastic. We have a really competitive card today, but the competitiveness, Dave and Adrian, is really only around the festivals. The day-to-day is becoming less competitive. Yeah. The Thurles on the Thursday, the Ferry House on a Monday, but the festivals themselves, I think, are retaining their competitiveness because you have the likes of JB McManus in the game as well.
Just before we look ahead to today, one of the other reflections from yesterday, obviously in the Stayers hurdle, and reading some of the quotes from Willie Mullins after himself and Ruby had looked at Faugheen and sort of decided that like maybe Faugheen's day is done, but sure, we'll give it one more go here, and I think at 11-2 paid off in spades. Were you expecting that?
No, I wasn't. If they don't know it, how are we supposed to know? That's the first thing. People are going, well, you haven't had a great week, have you, John? And I'm saying, well, if Willie Mullins or Ruby Walsh don't know, how am I supposed to know?
Yeah.
Now, David Mullins is really a rising star in the game. He's only 21. He's had a Grand National winner. You saw his reaction when he got touched off in Pleasant Company in the Grand National Aintree. He was gutted. And he's got a bit of fight about him, David Mullins. He won on Bell's Hill. He won the Gold Cup on Wednesday, and now he's won the Stayers hurdle on Faugheen. He was adamant, I want to ride this horse out in front, dictate the race in terms of pace, and then see if it works out for Faugheen.
Yeah.
And Faugheen, it's interesting that Ruby Walsh said the horse has been working really well at home all winter, but he's gone to the race track 3 times, twice at Leopardstown, once at Cheltenham, and just not fired. And maybe over the longer distance, and at a track where he's had a lot of success before, just it was his day, and he kind of lit up again. And you can't talk to them. They're not Mr. Ed. If you remember that 1960s TV series, the Talking Horse.
Didn't age that well, actually. I saw a clip of it recently. Didn't age well.
Okay.
Fond memories, but...
What are you doing watching Mr. Ed?
I know, listen, it's a reflection on my life, John, as opposed to anything else.
But won the horse. Fahim was a great story. He's a beloved horse. He's a champion hurdle winner, and the reception that he got from the real knowledgeable racing public of Punchestown was interesting. In comparison with the social media nonsense that went on in terms of the barrage that Paul Townend got for making a genuine mistake on Tuesday. But the horse I really took out yesterday was Footpad. This horse is going places. This could be a Gold Cup winner next year. Footpad. He's a brilliant jumper. That's probably the most impressive I've seen him all. He won at Cheltenham and he's won again yesterday, over 2 miles. He's got a lot of scope, and I think we're going to see him in the big races next year. Footpad.
Right, you're going to mark our card for today.
We'll do our best. We'll do our best.
Let's. We can go through them race by race if you want, but we want to start. I think most people are interested, obviously, in the champion hurdle at 5:30 here. And as Dave mentioned earlier on, there are a few people around here with a few bob on Samcro, and all expectations, despite being a novice, that Samcro's going to get it done.
Well, Johnny Ward, I think, advised 5-2 or 9-4 earlier in the week, and now he's 11-10 on. So he's odds on now. Samcro, he's like exceptional horse. He's a really exciting horse. Probably the most exciting horse I've seen since Moscow Flyer Isterback. We don't know the limit of his potential. He's never been beaten. He's got guts because he won his point in desperate conditions. So 6 years of age. The Cheltenham form has been franked, and that what I mean by that is that Black Hop, who was second, won at Aintree, and Next Destination, who was third, won the other day. So all the form has worked out. Back at 2 miles now, I think this will give a big indication of his future plans, or whether we're going to go hurdles or fences. So yeah, I mean, we're going to find out today. We don't know how good he is, so it could look like the best bet of all time, or it could look like, this was a step too far too soon.
Unbeaten in 7 starts.
Mellon was backed from 14-1 into 7s in the champion hurdle and nearly beat Bouvardere, who looked unbeatable all season. It was very, very close between Mellon and Bouvardere. Mellon is improving. I don't think it's going to be a penalty kick for Samcro. I think Mellon will put it up to Samcro.
There's a lot of people talking about Samcro. It's not about winning. It's about what sort of style Samcro's going to win in.
And maybe that will be the case, because that's the way he's won every single race beforehand. But this is the most competitive race he's been involved in to date. And Mellon is a good horse. Super Sunday is a good horse. Beat Faheen in that champion hurdle at Leopardstown earlier in the year. Wicklow Brave won the race last year. So it's not as straightforward as people think, that Samcro will just win it by 20 lengths. It won't work that way. So
what's the leaning for Mellon? I saw Ruby was having a bit of a sweet spot for Mellon as well. What's the leaning there? What are you thinking?
I just think he's an improver. They put a hood on him earlier in the season. It didn't work. And they tried to get his concentration better. They took it off for Cheltenham. But the money, the money that went on him at Cheltenham suggested to me there was serious stable confidence. 14-7s, and he was beaten like that. Bouvardere beat him by just about in the champion hurdle. That shows to me that he's an improving animal. They're probably enough cut in the ground. He likes a bit of cut in the ground. But last year, Punchestown, a horse called I think it's Seleas Emery beat him. So that would be a little bit of a question mark. He can be a little bit in and out, Mellon. Really, if he'd be winning champion hurdles and winning this race, he should have been winning at Christmas at Cheltenham, and he didn't. To me, it's a race not to have a bet in. It's a race to watch. We want to see Samcro. If Samcro was 3-1, I'd be piling in. But 11-10 on, I just think it's a race I want to watch and savour.
The main sort of recommendation of Samcro for me is how Michael O'Leary has been bending over backwards for God knows how long now to dampen expectations around this horse. Clearly, that's a pretty big indication that.
Yeah, and I met Gordon Elliott before Cheltenham, and I said, asked him about Samcro, and it was kind of a, whoa, don't ask me about Samcro. So I think there's a lot of nerves there, and there's a feeling they got something special on their hands.
Right.
And I think there was a lot of relief, was I think the overriding emotion when he won at Cheltenham, and he won easily. And when you back a horse and you just see it absolutely cruising, and unless it falls, you think, oh, that is one of the best feelings when you're backing a horse. Yeah. This horse is just living up to his potential. Isterback did that. Remember, Isterback won his first champion hurdle. You could just see it. This is going to happen, and it did happen, and in style, because we want to see race horses. We don't want to see Samcro, if he is the real deal, win by a neck today or a head. And maybe Mellon is very good, but we don't want to see him disappoint. We want to see him realise his potential, and hopefully he will today. But I'm not recommending a bet.
Yeah, you never know what happens. Like, witness the storyteller from earlier in the week. Like, there is a possibility that something crazy happens.
Well, since Donald Trump won the election, my whole attitude towards certainties in life has completely changed, and maybe it's a good thing. I remember New Zealand against France in the 2007 World Cup. I thought New Zealand were absolute bankers for that tournament, and then France did them in the quarterfinals. So I think my attitude towards racing certainties, excuse the pun, has changed completely. So it's actually a good thing because it corrects you if you think, well, I'm going to just steam into this and do something I shouldn't be doing, because you should always gamble responsibly, folks. If you don't gamble responsibly, it's not for you.
I haven't been on the Storyteller on Wednesday.
But you're just lucky. You need to do your millions.
Listen, tonight. It was insane. It was like coming to the last fence going, this guy is done and dusted. 6th, 7th at best.
That must have been such a buzz watching that.
It was really I was watching In the Night Garden and the 640 from Punchestown at the same time. It was quite the combination.
What's In the Night Garden?
It's not a racehorse.
Sort of how would you describe it, Dave? It's like what do you remember the Teletubbies? Remember the Teletubbies? It's like Teletubbies 2018.
On acid though.
Yeah. I'd say there's a lot of things going on in the background.
That reminds me of that years ago when I think I backed a John Oxhorse. And I backed the wrong one by mistake, and the wrong one won.
That's when you do your lotto.
At 8-1, so yeah.
Right, take us through a couple of these and what you're thinking. It's underway, 20-4 today.
20-4. Alpha Male is a hot favourite. We're all that, aren't we? Barry O'Neill is the champion point-to-point rider for Peter Maher. Das Mooser won the race last year. I think it's between the two of them in the betting, but it's not a race I like. I don't like these Hunters Chases. No bet recommendation in this.
Okay.
The second race is the 420. That's a handicap chase for novices over 2.5 miles. Kenboy is the favourite, number 1 for Willie Mullins. Ran at Cheltenham, lightly raced horse. Carrying a lot of weight though, 11 stone 10. Ruby Walsh in one of his columns today said he'd like to ride up for a review, which David Mullins is on. That's a 10-1 shot. Bellamy de Civila won last time. A nice decent weight at 10 stone 13. Belle Amélie de Civila. Noel Meade is in really, really good form at the moment, so he could be one. And A-rated is a very good jumper who's got course form at 20-1. So if I was going to have a bet on this, I might have a €1 each way on A-rated. A-rated and Bellamy de Civila are the two I like there. Score Mar has been put up by Pricewise in the Racing Post. He finished like a train at Cheltenham last year, and once again he's got a nice weight, 10 stone 8 under Mark Walsh, who had a winner yesterday on a Great View. So Score Mar, A-rated, Bellamy de Civila, a couple that you might be keeping an eye on.
Shari is another one that's in the mix there, but some of the previews I was reading about it, which could prove a cropper for a this handicap chase here. That jumping might be an issue. So
if jumping is an issue, forget about it.
Steer clear, yeah.
That it is called jump racing, and I always worry when I see the word mistake behind a horse's comments. Unless I already know the horse, they always make me sceptical. The 455 is a mare's handicap chase. 2.5 miles. Bonnie Kate I like, but probably the ground could be softer for her. Money for Magic of Light, Jessica Harrington, Robbie Power. That's come into 8-1. The favourite is Synopsis, Gordon Elliott, a 9-2 shot. Elusive Ivy has course winning form as a 20-1 shot, a £7 claimer on Elusive Ivy. So that'd be definitely one I'd be interested in looking at.
Bit of each way action there, maybe.
A bit of each way action on Elusive Ivy, but not a race I'm going to get heavily involved in. We've talked about the champion hurdle. The champion novice hurdle over 2.5 miles. We have Palisator is the favourite, 3-1. Davy Russell can do no wrong at the moment for Gordon Elliott. This horse skipped Cheltenham. He's been kept fresh and he's won his last 2 starts, and I think he's a worthy favourite, Palisator. Scarpetta has been running well for Willie Mullins, ran really, really well at Cheltenham. I don't think Whiskey Sarah will win this. I think he's a horse maybe for the summer. Gadabird disappointed the other day, ran too free. Duc de Ginevra has not really trained on. Dortmund Park might want a bit of heavier ground. Delta Work, a winner at Cheltenham, but why isn't Davy Russell riding it? He's riding Palisator. That could be a tip in itself, that Palisator could be difficult to beat in that one. Scarpetta would be the one I put against it. The 640, this is the one.
Coming now. Pay attention, folks.
Pay attention, because I've had a really bad week. Cad du Burlay, 5-1. William Biddick, this horse coming over from the UK. Rose Loxton trains it. Now this lady works with Paul Nichols. Paul Nichols used to train the horse. Cad du Burlay, I backed it at Cheltenham in the Fox Hunters. It jumped the last in the lead and it faded into 5th over 3 miles, 2.5 furlongs. This race today is over 3 miles, 2.5 furlongs less, and I think it's got a big chance of reaching the frame each way. I think it's each way bet to nothing on Cad du Burlay coming over from England in this Hunter's Chase. That's the bet of the day for me, clearly the bet of the day for me. What else we got? We got 2 more races to finish. A novice hurdle over 2 miles. Bit of money for Causey Arch, number 3, into 12-1. David Mullins, having such a great week for Willie Mullins, has only had 1 run and 1 win. So money for Causey Arch for David Mullins. Shady operator Joseph O'Brien has had a quiet enough week. He could be one to follow. Shady Operator is a 4-1 shot with Barry Geraghty. Deal Desterval, Paul Townend is 7-2. But a lot of these horses, they don't have enough runs for me. I'm guessing. You're guessing with some of these bumpers. You're guessing some of these novice hurdles. And once again, a bumper here towards the end. You're very much guessing what has Willie Mullins got in it. That's what I'm looking at first of all. He has one I think Katie is on. Durrell's Purgy is a 12-1 shot. Is Patrick riding anything here? Yeah, he's riding Southern Knights. Interesting to see Willie Mullins with a horse in a bumper race with a son on board at 9-1. So what does that suggest? Maybe they're not that fancied. Press Conference is the favourite for Jessica Harrington and Kate Harrington, 100-30. Fontley House, money for Fontley House, number 7 at 14-1. For Peter Fahey, that trainer of that, and then another short price horse is Nina Carberry's ride, First Approach. But you're really, in these kind of races, you're hoping, you're hitting and hoping rather than knowing that the form is there with some of the other races. You know the form of Samcro, you know the form of Bellin, and I know the form of Cad de Burleigh, and that's where my money's going today.
Very good, and all those tips up on offtheball.com, John.
That's right.
At some point today, and Willie Mullins to get it done is the short story.
Willie Mullins is over. He's going to be the champion trainer again, and Gordon will have to just bask in the fact that he's training the winner of the Irish and English Grand Nationals.
Yeah,
not a bad season. Not a bad season.
It's tough going. John, thanks million for coming in, as always. Just before we wrap, as I said, it is a world record length of a show today, so thanks for staying with us. We're all in time and a half here.
Is it just when I'm in?
It is pretty much, Dave. I don't know what that says about you.
Your car is waiting outside, Dave.
I seem to break the record every time I'm on the show.
Busy weekend coming up across all the Off the Ball channels. We've live games on Today FM and on todayfm.com tomorrow. Liverpool Stoke is the live game on todayfm.com tomorrow. It's Ron Jones and Gary Breen in the commentary seat for that one. It's going to be followed afterwards by Southampton and Bournemouth, and that is going to be Ian Beach and Brian Kerr in the commentary box for both of those. And I can tell you as well, there's a very special boot room coming your way on Premier League Live on Today FM tomorrow. It's the slot that goes out every Saturday at 5:30. Ray Houghton is this week's guest, and here's a short teaser of what's to come.
You know, every kid has a dream of being something or doing something. Majority of young boys want to be professional, and young girls, should I say, now as well. You know, everyone wants to try and play at the highest level when you're a footballer, and you always want to play at the biggest stages, and you want to prove yourself. And for me, you know, that was all them doubters from years gone by when I didn't make it because I was too small. People question you, then you get your chance, and then at West Ham when you're rejected, and you know you've got to go and fight for your space again to be a pro, and then all that emotion comes out at once, you know, because then you've said, yeah, I've arrived, I've done it on the biggest stage that you can for your international team.
Yeah, so all information is that Ray Houghton at 5:30 on Today FM is going to be the best boot room that we've had so far, so tune in for that. Also then on Saturday over and Off the Ball on News Talk, Tommy Martin of TV3 fame is going to be presenting. So I mean, if you're tired of Nathan Murphy, and let's face it lads, nobody gets tired of Nathan Murphy, tune in for Tommy Martin on Saturday. He's going to be joined for the Saturday panel by Anthony Moyles, Hugo McNeil and Dan MacDonald for the Saturday panel. That's from 1 o'clock, and then on Off the Ball on Sunday it's an extended show, 1 o'clock to 7, the newspaper review in the company of, drumroll, Hector O'Huckagon is going to be making, I think it's his Sunday paper's debut, so it'll be interesting to get his take. I'm sure he'll have thoughts on Punchestown as well, and Colm Keys, the GAA writer for the Irish Independent as well, will be alongside him. West Ham United and Manchester City, live commentary there. Ian and Brian Kerr are on their way over there to the London Stadium. That's a 2:15 start on Sunday, and then as we told you a bit earlier on, Dave is going to be winging his way alongside Kevin over to Old Trafford. It's Manchester United against Arsenal for full live and exclusive commentary from 4:30. It's been epic, but that's it. Dave, thanks a million.
Good day.
John, thanks a lot.
Adrian, Dave, happy Friday.
9:45 on this Friday morning. Good morning to you.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.